The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is sponsored by Two Fat Lardies, Firestorm Games, and the very generous donations of you, the listener. Thank you to everyone for your continued support. We really do appreciate it. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast, episode 277. Supersystem, with hosts Neil Shook and Mike Hobbs, and guest presenter Patreon Neil Hughes. This show was recorded on the 27th of September 2019. Hello, good evening, or good morning in this particular instance, and welcome to another episode of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. 'Tis I, the Brummy Dwarf, and recording late on a Friday evening, UK time, for a change. On this show, I am really pleased to be joined by probably one of our longest serving listeners. This is, of course, one of our quarterly patron shows, and as such we have all the way from the other side of the planet. It would have been so much easier if we recorded this a few months ago when we were actually in the same time zone, but there we go. It is the Danger Gamer himself, the man with the coolest avatar on Twitter, Mr. Neil Hughes. Hello Neil, how are you?
Hello, can you hear me?
Good day.
Hang on, I've got to fight off the crocodiles. Hang on, there's kangaroos everywhere. Get out of here, get out of here. Hang on, I better stop this music. Go, how you going?
I'm alright, mate. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Yeah. It's been early in the morning, but I'm raring to go.
Yeah, as I say, I mean, it's late. It's late in the UK, which means that it must be really, really early in Australia.
Yeah, I normally when I have an early start, I tend to wake up about an hour or so before my alarm. So I was up at about 4 o'clock this morning.
Oh dear. Okay, so sorry to drag you out of bed, mate.
No,
but it's fantastic to have you on the show. As I say, I mean, you've been with us since right from the start, as far as I remember.
Yeah, pretty early on. Yeah. Back in the Whispering Neil years or whatever you called them. so yeah, pretty early on. And then of course, once I discovered it, I went back and devoured all the other episodes I'd missed. So. Yeah, long-time listener, first-time caller, as they say.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant to have you on, mate. Brilliant to have you on. So we've got Neil on today, and we're like, hang on. Excuse me one second. Who's this?
Hello.
We appear to have something that's looking kind of fairly out of breath, somewhat bedraggled. It's a Welsh wizard.
Hello all.
Hello.
Good grief. Hey, Mr. Hobbs, nice of you to join us.
Yeah, sorry, I kind of got my dates wrong. So, dear listener, about an hour ago, when I was in the middle of playing the game, I had a text off Neil going, "You all ready for tonight?" Well, I'm thinking, oh dear. So, one frantic dash home, and here I am.
You need to sack your social manager.
Well, so at this point, I need to issue an apology. To Jeff, but not that Jeff, the other Jeff.
Jeff.
Jeff, I'm really sorry that Mr. Hobbs cannot organise his social life. Two of us were in the place that we thought we were and thought we were meant to be at a certain particular time on a certain evening. Somebody else was out having fun wargaming.
Guilty as charged, sir.
Well, at least you were gaming. I mean, if you were just kind of out, I don't know, in a pub watching rugby or something, that would have been just.
No, there's no rugby for us until Sunday when we're playing some Australian team.
Yes, it's going to be a big day. My loyalties are split at the moment because obviously I was born in Wales but lived in Australia for most of my life. So it's going to be an I'm hoping it's going to be a very close game and Wales just gets across the line. That's probably the best outcome I can hope for. So
good. I hope we smash you into the mud.
It's mixed emotions. Basically, I support Wales in everything,
except
for this one,
yeah.
And of course, I support anyone playing New Zealand. I have to always oppose the New Zealanders.
Similar thing with us. We always support anybody who's playing England.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true.
I'm not saying a word. I'm going to keep it out of this one. Well, yeah. So, Mr. Hobbs, welcome. How are you?
Hello.
How are you? Because one would, one comes to understand that one went on a holiday. Somebody went on holiday and was struck down whilst away. Are you? How are you doing, mate? Are you any better?
I'm a bit better. Yeah, it was one of those holidays where the first day I managed to burn my shoulder. Second day I tripped up and twisted my ankle. And then I came down with a massive throat and ear infection. I was on antibiotics and all sorts of other strange Bulgarian medicines.
Was that in the tourist brochure?
I didn't mention that one. No, it was all.
Yeah, that was next.
Okay. Yeah, that was the next one. Yeah. So my lovely all-inclusive hotel with free beer. I couldn't drink, couldn't get out to see any of the sights, and then it was a Thomas Cook holiday.
Did you make it back before the collapse?
Day before.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it was a little bit dicey though. So not the relaxing holiday I was after.
So, a thrilling adventure, shall we say, or not, or perhaps not so thrilling adventure, but not the sort of thing you might want when you're kind of going, I don't know, I just want to go somewhere, see some sights, and eat and drink for a week.
Pretty much, yeah, that was my plan. Didn't happen.
Well, it's good to have you back for a start, and yeah, one hopes that you recover soon. I mean, I know we will be coming on to this, but I see you've kind of been reconciling yourself and trying to rehabilitate by getting the paint out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I've been doing a bit, but we'll come on to that later. Let's talk about Neil.
Indeed, let us indeed talk about Neil because as we have said, Mr. Hughes was won or some would say lost the latest draw to be our Patreon and join us in the third chair on the show. Of course, he's not been on the show before, which means, and Neil, you've listened to enough of these to know what happens now. It is time for you to introduce yourself to the listeners. It is time for us to find out all about how you got into this fair hobby of tabletop gaming. So, Mr. Hughes, fire away.
So is this where we key the harp music now, do we, for the sort of flashback, timey-wimey, wibbly wobbly sort of thing?
Yeah, this is where I turn. This is where I turn into Simon Bates. Yes. So wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. Yeah. So how long have you been gaming, mate?
I'm actually relatively, compared to other people you've had on the past and to yourselves, I'm probably what you'd call a late bloomer. I guess I went back and made some notes to look at my childhood, which was a harrowing sort of thought. But anyway, basically similar things to you guys in my younger days. Sort of like my big thing was model airplane kits. So Airfix, Matchbox, Revell. That was my thing. And the ceiling in my room was covered with airplanes hanging by fishing line. So that was most of my childhood and early teens was taken up building model aircraft. Toy soldiers, I had the typical sort of Airfix toy soldiers. The 1/32 scale plastics from Airfix. So I had some like Japanese and desert rats, which fought against each other endlessly in the backyard. Also Star Wars action figures, because I was a big Star Wars fan. I think Star Wars was the very first film I ever saw in a cinema, and it was actually just before we emigrated to Australia. So that was a sort of pivotal moment in my development, I suppose. Going on to the teenage years, I think the biggest thing was that I discovered The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. So that sort of brought me into the fantasy side of things, and I was just obsessed about that. And then we discovered D&D. And so that was a fairly intense sort of period of a few years where I got right into role playing. There was no sort of wargaming at this point. It was just really just early teenage years, role playing. Yeah. Played a lot of the basic D&D, the old red book, red box, I should say. Played a fair bit of that. Didn't really play a lot of AD&D, mainly just stuck with the basic D&D. I also had a dwarf, so that's I also share a fascination with the shorter statured heroes. Played a bit of Traveller, and then a couple other games, Middle Earth role playing, bit of Bushido. Played an Australian role playing game which I remembered just recently, called Hunter Planet. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that, but that was. It was an Australian role-playing game called Hunter Planet. I don't know if it made it outside of...
No,
yeah.
That one.
No, it was... From what I can remember, it was a fairly simple game where you landed in Australia, you were aliens, and you basically just went around killing everything, which was... There wasn't much substance to it. But I do recall that my alien was like an egg-shaped alien. And when you got wounded... Instead of having like a healing potion, the healing potions healed you, but they also mutated you. So as you went on further and further into the game, you developed more and more mutations. And I seem to recall that my egg developed a waist. So if you can make like an egg timer looking alien running around killing kangaroos and other Australians, that was pretty much Hunter Planet. So that was my role playing. Then I suppose I got into a little bit of more into the wargaming side of things with played a bit of Car Wars.
Yeah.
So I actually preempted Gaslands by taking Matchbox cars and sticking bits of model aircraft missiles and things onto Matchbox cars playing Car Wars. So I preempted Gaslands by about 20 odd years. Hero Quest, played quite a lot of that. Still got my game, still a fantastic game. Love Hero Quest. And Space Crusade, which is, I suppose that's the poor man's Space Hulk. Played a bit of that. Played a little bit of the Hex board game, war games. My first board war game was Ogre.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
You don't know if you remember Ogre. Yeah, Ogre and GEV. I played a lot of that, the Steve Jackson games. They've actually just done a Kickstarter recently where they're actually re-releasing all these old games. They're actually doing reproductions of the original. If you remember the little plastic box games that these came in, like Illuminati, Ogre, the whole range of his games used to come out in these little plastic boxes. I don't know if you remember them. They're like like an old video cassette type box. The games came out. So I played a bit of that. As far as miniatures go, I never really could afford any miniatures. My parents seemed to be of the view that I didn't need pocket money, so it was very hard for me to scrape together cash to buy miniatures. I always was kind of aware of them through role playing, but I think the closest thing I came to it early on was these Steve Jackson cardboard heroes. Do you remember the cardboard heroes? Essentially it was like like it sounds, it was just a little cardboard thing with a stand which had a picture of a dwarf on it or a picture of an orc or something.
Yeah. I remember those.
So we used to play role playing with those. And then, yeah, that was pretty much it for my teenage years. Then I went to university, so there was still no real wargaming as such at this point. And I went to university, early 90s, and I think my first introduction to wargaming was I picked up a flyer at a model shop for a wargaming club out in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne. So this would have been probably 93, 94, something like that. And so I just went along to check it out. And I think the very first official war game I ever played was an American Civil War game with Airfix figures. Very simple rules. You had to guess the ranges for the artillery. There was canister cones. There was no real morale system. It was essentially just a fixed breaking point for casualties. But it was still a lot of fun. So then I started, for the next couple of years, I did do a bit of wargaming. Crimean War, Zulu War, using the old 1/72 scale sort of Eschi plastics. I didn't actually paint any of those. I was using a mate's armies. The only stuff I've really sort of painted was I did paint a bunch of 1/72 scale Eschi Napoleonics, and ridiculously I started with something simple like Highlanders painting tartan, and decided to start in small steps and just work way up from that. So painted up quite a few soft plastic Napoleonics, but I didn't really know much about undercoating and protecting and varnishing and things like that. And I was, after all this effort of painting these figures, the paint started to flake off the barrels and things, and I was just so heartbroken about the whole thing. But I basically scrapped the whole idea. And I swore I would never, ever, ever paint soft plastics ever again, which I pretty much kept until last year. I think I stayed away from them until just recently. But using new technology and new techniques, I was able to actually start painting some up, so I can talk about that a bit later on. Yeah, as far as my first official miniatures I got, I think I bought some Norster Wars. I think I bought about a dozen of those and painted them up. Got the old Citadel painting guide, and I did the base coats and the washes and then the dry brushing, and followed it all religiously. And it took forever to paint them. I picked up the Warhammer Fantasy Battles 3rd edition hardback book.
Oh yeah.
And that's about as far as I got into Warhammer, because, like I said, I didn't really have any spare cash. So, and Games Workshop stuff or Citadel stuff back then was still pretty expensive, and I suppose things haven't changed. So I never really built an army. That I did buy one of these the Skeleton Horde box. Do you remember that?
You got the Skeleton Horde box?
I had the Skeleton Horde box.
We were chatting about that a couple of shows ago. We kind of went, we wish you'd have bought that.
I've still got the empty box. The figures I finally got around to painting the figures. Actually, I had the box, but it was a great sort of starter force. But I didn't have enough to do a whole army. And I kind of just sort of let it sit on my shelf for years. Didn't even touch it because I couldn't think of any reason to start them, because I didn't have the funds to sort of build up a bigger army. And it just sort of sat there. And after that, I took a break from wargaming. So I probably had a break of about 5 years where I finished off uni, work, getting married, all that sort of stuff. I also had a bit of a distraction. I have a bit of a side interest in animation and puppetry and things. So I actually quit my science job and went and did a film school and made some films, animated films, sort of like your Wallace and Gromit type stop motion type stuff. So that's where I picked up a lot of skills on sculpting and model making and casting and things like that. So I did that for about 5 years, so there was no wargaming at all during that period. It was pretty much just totally focused on animation.
Does any of that survive anywhere?
Yeah. I mean, I made 3 films, 2 films. I think actually all my films are up on YouTube.
All right. Oh, cool.
Because it was a proper film school thing, so it was a Victorian College of the Arts, so I did a couple of films there, and then I submitted the films to film festivals, and they showed in film festivals around the world. Picked up a couple of local awards for animation. Then I tried to get work in a commercial environment, sort of freelancing. Worked on a couple of commercials, helping building models and sets and puppets, and doing a little bit of animation. But it's one of these things that doesn't really pay unless you have to be fairly lucky to sort of develop a career in that sort of industry. So after 5 years and my wife's patience ran out, I had to go back and get a real job. So I went back to the sort of science industry, and I've been doing that ever since. I still hope to do some more animation and things in the future when I can get a studio set up in my garage, as long as I can convince my wife that she can't put the car in the garage, because she seems to have this silly idea for garages for putting cars in, which I can't understand. But anyway,
That's a very good idea.
It is, yeah. So I'm just I've got a heap of junk in my garage at the moment, which I have to clean out. But yeah, so anyway, so that was the sort of diversion for about a 5-year period, and then I went back to the hobby. Early 2000s, and then since then I've been back in it ever since. I when I got back into it, there was a bunch of guys playing DBA 15mm Ancients, and so I did quite a bit of that for a little while, and ran a few campaigns, doing samurai campaigns, crusades, the Roman Civil War, playing DBA. I quite enjoyed DBA. We were playing DBA 2.2, which was a pretty good rule set, although there was a couple of things which I found frustrating with it. But we also, and actually this comes back to that skeleton box I was talking about, because we discovered hordes of the things, and I realized that with my skeleton box I could actually make an entire skeleton army with that one box. So that's what I did. So then after that, then I started buying the Warhammer stuff because I had more funds then. And so after that, I made a High Elves, Hordes of the Things army, a Skaven, a Lizard Man. Yeah, a few different armies for playing Hordes of the Things. And that took up a lot of my gaming. Didn't play much of the Warhammer stuff at all. I did do a big 40k Necron force and a big 40k Orc force, mainly for my son, because my son showed a little bit of an interest in it when he was younger. Yeah. But I've sold off most of that now. I think I've still got the Necrons just sitting in a box in the garage, but all the Orc stuff got sold off. I did play a bit of Epic, Mike. I've got an Imperial Guard army, 3,000 points. We played Epic Armageddon, not your net Epic. But it's a bit of an orphan army, unfortunately. I've got to just got quite a nice Imperial Guard army, but I need to paint it up an opposing force for that. And I think you've been doing the Vanguard stuff recently.
Yeah, I've been dabbling.
Yes. So yeah, I'm eyeing off possibly the Skinners. I think they're like the Orc equivalent. I'm going to possibly get some of those in the future. The other big games that I played once I got back into the hobby was I played quite a lot of Victorian science fiction using a rule set called Gaslight.
Yeah, that's a game.
Yeah, I did a heap of that, and I really did go crazy with it. I because I mentioned before I can do all the sculpting and casting. Well, I designed and sculpted up my own Martian tripods, and so I made some big tripods and did some big Martian games with plucky British redcoats fighting Martian tripods. I built floating islands out of polystyrene to do a game set on Venus, and a whole heap of stuff. That was probably a good 5 or 6 year period of me doing a lot of Gaslight and Victorian science fiction, and then we sort of moved into things like Empire of the Dead and In Her Majesty's Name when we wanted to play smaller games. As far as World War II, I didn't get into that until again pretty late. Started off with Crossfire, 15mm World War II, playing Crossfire. Played quite a bit of that. Yeah. Sort of gave it away once things like Chain and Command came along, because Crossfire is one of these rule sets that was really good and had some innovative mechanics, but it really needed a second edition, and we ended up having to have so many different house rules to sort of make it play how we thought it should play, but it got to the point where it's like what's the point in playing these rules? You basically just got a bunch of house rules, so you could never play. If anyone else came along, if they played Crossfire, you'd have to explain all the different house rules you were playing. So gave that away, and then that sort of brings us to today. And I guess the games that keep me busy these days, I play a lot of Frostgrave. Massive fan of Frostgrave. It really tapped into that sort of D&D nostalgia bug, and then rolling the D20s and all that. It was just great, and it really gave me an opportunity to paint up a lot of fantasy stuff, like yourself, Neil, that I hadn't done. I had gone through a pretty long sort of historical period, so it's good to be able to be painting skeletons and ghouls and zombies and ogres and things like that. So Frostgrave, and also looking at getting into Rangers of Shadow Deep. The main historical game I play is probably my English Civil War, but I posted quite a bit of that on Twitter using the pike and shot rules from Black Warlord Games. Yeah. The Supersystem, which we'll talk about later on, playing quite a bit of that these days. And getting back to the soft plastics, we've at our local club, we've been doing a sort of Imaginations campaign set in 1980s Bush Wars. Oh, okay. So we're painting up a lot of 20 mil soft plastics as a fictional African 1980s countries run by little tin pot dictators and so on. So my country is the Democratic Republic of Bungo, or Umbongo for short. And so that means I'm painting up a lot of, I think I got some Viet Cong, which you paint up, they come up as Umbongo Republican Guard or militia, and then you get yourself some MiG-15s or MiG-21s for ground attack, and old T-62s and Centurion tanks and things like that. So been doing a bit of that in the 20 mil soft plastics. Cool. And then I guess the only thing I've just recently, I've actually started playing DBA again with my son, who's come back to wargaming after having a break himself, and he's been painting up a bunch of 6 mil Punic War stuff. So we've been playing a bit of DBA 3.0, which is actually a really good improvement on 2.2. All the problems I had with 2.2 have been fixed essentially. So it's actually not a bad little game if you've got 45 minutes for a quick game. So I've been playing a bit of that, and of course other games like Chain of Command, Lion Rampant. Playing a bit of soccer, Striker. There's a game called Striker for playing soccer games. Yeah. So that's a lot of fun. And then also looking at getting to things like the small scales again, like 6 mil and smaller. I've been doing a bit of that. So that pretty much brings me up to today. That's pretty much me.
Cool. So basically, all sorts of stuff these days.
Yeah, I'm a bit of one of these magpies. I sort of flick from one thing to another. I probably have about 4 or 5 core games, which most of my effort is going towards, but I've still got other projects sort of lingering in the background, as most people do. But I have a fairly eclectic wargaming hobby, I suppose. I'm not too singularly focused on one particular game.
Most excellent stuff. Great, well. Thank you for that, Neil. Yeah, most definitely one of us. So, right.
Did I come in under 30 minutes or not? I wasn't keeping track of time.
Oh, yeah. Well, you squeezed it under the bar. Yeah. Yes. Well done, mate. Well done.
Yeah, that's good.
Cool. Excellent. Well, in that case, then, what we'll do, thank you for introducing yourself. As Neil said, a bit later on in the show, we're going to be looking at Supersystem. But before then, so much more to talk about before then. So we'll take a quick break. And when we come back, it is time once again to enter into the confessional box. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is proud to be sponsored by Two Fat Lardies, purveyors of the finest rules, supplements and gaming accessories for all your wargaming needs. Most recent in their offerings include the September War Anniversary Bundle, marking 80 years since the start of World War II. This is a 2 scenario book set for I Ain't Been Shotgun. In accompaniment to that, you have a free PDF download of Blitzkrieg in the East Part 1 Poland, which contains a number of army lists for I Ain't Been Shotgun. This is a free PDF download. And a special offer on the Kriegspiel Compendium. Rules, scenarios and a map for this classic wargame. Don't forget that you can get more Two Fat Lardies by viewing Lard TV on YouTube. The latest episodes include parts 3 and 4 of Taking the Gemblow Gap, a playthrough of General Dame, Rich Clark finishing his build of the Blacksmith, and Sydney's Battlefield Challenge. Also, don't forget that for your listening pleasure, you can also download The Oddcast. It's available on Lord TV, but also via your podcast app of choice. Two Fat Lardies. Play the period, not the rules. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight once again of the great Guru Love himself. Since I've finally seen him after several weeks, actually, it's one slight problem when you're working for yourself, that he doesn't tend to turn up to gaming sessions very often.
I thought he was in some sort of monastery in Nepal. On some sort of sabbatical, studying the ways of dilution theory and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, he's probably in some sort of monastery. But if he's in some sort of monastery, he's probably he's probably painting it.
Yeah,
He's chatting to the Dalai Lama about different colours of duck egg blue or something.
yeah.
Indeed. Yeah. So here we are. It is that time of the show again where we gather together and find mutual solace, and as I've discovered this week, we actually provide a huge public service.
We do,
because apparently there are many of our listeners who are out there looking at what they bought and console themselves with the thought of, well, at least I haven't bought as much as Hobbsy and Shuki have this month. So there we go. So there we go. Here we are.
It is inspiration to us all.
Well, So here we are, pleased to provide this extra
service.
Yes. This extra service and if nothing else, we are the poster boys that you can always point your other half to say, you thought I was bad, I'm not as bad as them.
Yeah.
So yes,
I think everyone has one person that they can always point the finger to. There's a guy in our club that I think that when he finally dies, the Environmental Protection Authority will probably condemn his property for lead poisoning. I think he's always buying something.
Yes, so much lead in the house, he distorts the local gravitational field. Yes.
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 Indeed. Yeah, it's a good job they moved to plastics. That's all I can say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So here we are. Then it is that time of the show, and as has become the custom, I think I shall start.
Indeed.
It has been. I've tried to be good.
Yeah.
Obviously, from our last show, you discovered that the major issue of this month is the fact that there has been a certain Kickstarter running for Baron Wars figures. Thank you, Mr. Hobday and Mr. Hicks, which I appear to have. That's going to cost me. That's going to cost me a few pounds when that completes in a couple of days. So yeah, And because of that, I thought, well, I'm going to have to be good for everything else. It almost worked. Right, so...
How long did that last?
Yeah, I mean, well, okay. In my defence, you end up in situations where, well, you have things that it's almost too good to miss. Right. One of my usual friendly local game show haunts, which is Battlefield Hobbies in Daventry, are moving premises. They're moving a few miles from their current location. And as such, they decided to basically appeal to the gaming community and say, we don't really want to move all this stock, so we'll have a sale until we move. So they currently they've got a 25% off their entire stock at this point in time. I think they're due to move. It's gone for a couple of weeks. They're due to move in a couple of weeks. So as part of that, they happen to have a copy of Return to Hoth, the Imperial Assault expansion, so with the 25%, it ended up being about 40 quid, which is about the cheapest as you'll get it anywhere. So, and especially since that's one of the two major box sets that's in the Legends of the Alliance app, I thought it would be rude not to. So I picked up a copy of that. And then, as a result of that, of course, there are ally and villain packs for each of the expansions, which I believe that even though you get counters in the game, it's so much better if you've got the figures. So I may have bought those. So what was it? It was Leia and General Sorin and Dengar. I already had the Echo Base Troopers. I picked those up separately. Yeah, so that was that, and I was still trying to be good. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the other thing I'd forgotten about was that it was ChillCon last weekend. It was ChillCon Derby. ChillCon Derby. Strangely enough, actually, it's probably the least amount of time I've ever spent at a show. It was. I mean, this is kind of spoiler alert for later, but it was probably coupled with the fact that they bought several hundredweight of MDF, and so got to the point where we turned around and said, "This backpack's getting far too heavy. We need to go home." But anyway, so had a wander around there and was doing my best to say no, especially when I found out like Mighty Lancer were there. Now, Mighty Lancer, amongst other things, are one of the biggest stockists of Reaper in the UK, and they bought a huge number of racks. I mean, I could have spent all morning just going through their racks, especially in the light of things like Rage of the Shadow Deep and stuff, and looking for all these nice little fantasy monsters to paint these days. It's become a slightly new obsession of mine. That was so I had to get dragged away from that. But one thing I did come across, and was surprised by actually how big their range is getting. Iron Gate Scenery. Now I first came across them because they were doing some stalls that were suitable for gangs of Rome. Okay, so they were doing some nice little bits of scatter scenery for that. But they do a lot of resin and I think on like 3D printed plastic. And their range has increased massively. And they've got loads of stuff now, really, really impressive. I mean, they've got on their store, they've effectively got a small Gangs of Rome table. So as well as market stalls, you've got a load of different extra bits for construction and just tons of different bits of scatter scenery. That's primarily what they do. So I ended up buying a couple of bits of that. I ended up buying a tavern pack and a well, and had to step away at that point because they have just loads and loads of stuff. And then, you see, the other thing was, walk by Atlantis Miniatures. And I always say hi to the guys at Atlantis Miniatures. I always look at all their dwarves and go, and kind of go, no, not this time. And I seem to remember earlier in the year, I kind of promised that I'd buy something at Chilcon. I said, look, okay, I will buy something off you at Chilcon Derby, I promise.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, and of course we get there, and of course I've just backed this Baron Wars Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
But they're there, and I mean, actually, there's a new shiny I need to talk about for these guys, because they're doing something which I believe is launching at the tabletop gaming show this weekend.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that in a minute. But as you know, their dwarves are fairly spectacular. I ended up buying one figure from them, which, funny enough, is the one that you bought, which is the dwarf general mounted on the armored bear.
Oh, cracking!
That's a nice figure, yeah.
That's a lovely figure. Now, because they've had it on sale in the shop online for a while, but every time I look, it's out of stock. And I happen to go, oh, have you got this in stock? It's, oh yeah, we've got it here. Wrong answer. Okay, thanks. So there we go. Yeah, so there we go. And then managed to get hold of a few contrast paints because although I've only had a couple, I wanted to try things with a couple more and a couple of ideas of some stuff that I wanted to paint. So bought a few contrast paints, which I know Neil has been playing around with a lot, and Hobbs has been playing around with a bit. So I'm sure we'll find out more about that in the hobby section. But that's about me. Imperial Assault, and essentially all stuff that I really shouldn't be buying because I've got a car MOTG. So that's me.
Don't let the real world get in the way of your hobby, Neil.
This is it. I'm kind of thinking, I shouldn't be doing this really. We shall see. So yeah, that's me. So, Mr. Hughes, what have you been up to recently? What has been emptying your wallet?
Yeah, but a bit of a varied bunch. I actually started off the year quite well. I didn't buy any figures for like 3 or 4 months, and then I think the first figures I bought for the year was actually when I was over in the UK, and I did the Lead Belt tour and went to War Games Foundry and North Star, and they all sort of looked at me funny when I knocked on their door and said, "Hello, can I come in? I've come from Australia. Can I have a look around?" And they sort of went, "Oh, okay, yeah, come on in." So bought some sports. Yeah, people in the UK don't realise that when you're in Australia or I suppose New Zealand or other parts foreign, you sort of build up your idea in your mind of what these sort of shops are that you think, I'll go to Wargaming Valhalla, I'll go to Wargames Foundry, or I'll go to North Star or Warlord and buy these figures, and then so when you turn up on their doorstep, they kind of look at you like, give you a funny look because you're sort of expecting all these great things, and then it's just a warehouse. And although North Star's warehouse was impressive, once they basically said, "Oh yeah, come on in and have a run of the place," and I sort of just went around all the shelves grabbing things, and this actually when I was at Warlord, they're only about 100 meters away from each other, I think. So I just walked over to Warlord, and
they're across the car park, aren't they?
Yeah, they're across the car park. So I didn't actually buy any figures in Warlord. I actually came away with a couple of rule sets. I bought the Warlord Zavera one and the Black Powder second edition, I think, from memory. But yeah, so I mean, at the Games Expo, I picked up the 3 mil Magister Militant stuff. The was it called Osmond or something? Yeah. So I picked up some of that, which is still sitting in the pile waiting to be painted for Rommel. I was going to do 3 mil World War II for North Africa for Rommel. But yeah, I suppose lately bought a lot of contrast paints. I've probably bought 24, almost the entire range of contrast paints.
Oh, okay.
Been trying them out quite a fair bit. I've been picking up quite a few Reaper Bone stuff as well for Rangers as the Shadow Deep. I've got a couple of ogres sitting on the painting table at the moment. backed a couple of Kickstarters, the Steve Jackson's Pocketbook games, which I mentioned before, the Ogre and GEV, the re-releases.
Yeah.
I've decided to go for a bit of a nostalgia fix and buy them. So I'm waiting on them. Escape the Dark Sector, Kickstarter.
Yes.
Backed that.
Cool.
Because I really liked in Escape the Dark Castle. I really enjoyed playing that. The Train Essentials train book. That was a Kickstarter recently.
Oh,
King of Dungeons, which
from Mal the Terrain Shooter, that one.
So I picked that up.
Yeah, cool.
Mainly for my son because he's, like I said, he's taken an interest again in wargaming, so I might give him a copy of that book so he can pick up some tips. The King of Dungeons role-playing game because I think, like Mike, I've started to revisit my youth and look at role-playing games, and so digging out the old Dungeons and Dragons stuff. And I think at the Games Expo I picked up a copy of the Star Trek role-playing game, which I'm hoping to start playing soon. Got the Mythic Battles 1.5 came in a couple of weeks ago. Got delivery of that.
How'd you also like that, Neil?
Moving swiftly on.
It's beautiful figures, aren't they, Mike?
Ah, fantastic! Yeah, really, really crisp, wonderful detail. Amazing, yours have got halfway around the world. Oh.
Yeah. Got the whole lot. Got the Ymir, the Norse god thing is great. I'm going to be using that for Mortal Gods or was it Gods and Mortals? The
Gods and Mortals,
yeah. Or maybe Saga Age of Magic if I can stomach playing that game. But
yeah. There is a story. There is a story behind that comment. Yes, we might come back to it at some point. Yeah, moving swiftly on.
Yeah. And then I guess I had a little accident last night. I suppose that's the most recent thing. I was just on the internet as you do, and I found myself ordering a couple of boxes for Black Seas.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yes. So, and actually, coincidentally, there was also a Kickstarter just recently for 3D print files for Napoleonic ships, which I also backed because I am still waiting for a 3D printer, which I backed from Kickstarter about 2 years ago, which I'm thinking I'm never actually ever going to get. But I probably will, for Christmas present, I'm looking at getting a resin 3D printer so I can print off these ships, and they're 1/600 scale, so we only have to adjust them a little bit to match the same scale as Black Seas. But I'll have, I suppose next year there'll be a lot of Napoleonic naval gaming in my future, I think. So yeah, that's pretty much me for my purchases.
Wow. a couple of bits and pieces then.
Yeah, I suppose I'm flying the Meeples miniatures flag proudly.
Good man.
What a guy.
Yes.
Cool. Right, okay, how about you, Mr. Hobbs?
Oh, not a huge amount.
You've been on holiday.
I've been on holiday. So, whilst I was on holiday, in my sick bed.
Yeah, I noticed it. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, yeah, yes, I suppose the excuse was, well, I had to find something to do with my day. Is it?
Yeah.
Is this it?
Yeah, pretty much. So, I did get told that Vanguard were doing a 1-day sale because it was their 4th birthday. I think Vlad told me about that one, so thank you, Vlad.
Right.
So,
glad I didn't hear about that beforehand.
Yeah. One drug-induced purchase later.
Oh, we're on that sort of excuse now, are we?
Yep.
I didn't know what I was doing, honest.
Yeah, I was just pressing buttons on my phone. So I bought most of my Space Wolf inventory and some transport for the next phase of my mad Burning the Prospero game.
Right.
Lots of those. I bought Battle of Britain from PSC because they've done that mad offer where you can get it for £25.
And to be fair, why wouldn't you? Because it is actually a really good game.
Yeah. I haven't opened it yet. It's still in the box. but I got that.
Yeah, it's a good game. It's a good game. Good game.
Yeah, I look forward to trying that.
Even
I bought all the extra planes that they released. The infamous bendy planes. They were selling them off really cheap, and I bought a heap of them for Bag the Hun.
Mm.
Oh right, okay, oh, that's a good idea. Yeah,
I think they are still selling them off cheap. I'm sure I saw like an offer like 100 planes for £15 or something.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah.
So, in addition to the extra planes which I got in the Kickstarter as well, so I think I got something in the order of like 200 planes for Battle of Britain.
Yeah, that'll do. I mean, you want about 6 or maybe 9 for Bag the Hun, but it's always good to have a few extras.
Yeah, a couple extras just in case. Yeah.
Don't know. I picked up an old game by Cubicle 7 called Hobbit Tales from the Green Dragon Inn, which I've been after for a little while. It's a card game.
oh well, okay.
It's a little.
Oh, I thought it was an RPG.
Well, they've done the One Ring, and this can be used as part of the One Ring. But basically, it's a storytelling card game where you basically compete to tell the most fantastic story. And it's a card game, and you basically somebody tries to put together a story from cards that are put down, sort of drives sort of plot points and so forth. But I fancied that for a long time, and I saw it pop up on eBay, so I picked that up. What else? Oh yes, Paladin role-playing game. So this is by KSCM. Paladin is a game that's based on the Pendragon role-playing game, which was Greg Stafford's sort of medieval chivalric role-playing game.
Right.
And this Paladin is basically that game set in the time of Charlemagne. So it's it's high knights in France, and it's a beautiful game. I picked up the PDF a while ago, so when it came up on the hardback, I picked it up, and it's a huge book. It's one of these games where you basically play in, a dynasty. So you don't just play a single knight going off on his travels. You have campaigns that last hundreds of years. So your characters basically form part of that dynasty, and you sort of follow, their ups and downs, which is a great idea. So pick that up.
That's a bit different.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful book, which always nice, and it's a great little system as well. And I backed a couple of Kickstarters. So there's Slay Industries, second edition. So this is another RPG. Slay Industries is, it came out originally in the early 90s, I think. And it's sort of a sci-fi dystopian style game, sort of corporations and stuff. I heard a lot of good things about it. And it just popped up on Kickstarter. I just thought, it's worth just doing a little pledge for it. So I've just done a sort of basic pledge. Just to pick up the newly designed rules and some extras from the originals. But yeah, so it's that. What else did I back? Oh yeah, Time of Destinies. Sorry, Time of Legends Destinies. Which
Yes,
is,
that seems intriguing. Tell me more, Mr. Hobbs. Tell me more.
Well, it's a board game. It's set in, I was going to say, the universe of Joan of Arc board game.
Right.
With-
Okay. As in the Mythic Games Joan of Arc game.
Yes. And it's a competitive story-driven game. So it's an exploration game. It's app-driven, it's competitive. I looked at it and thought, it looks quite interesting. So obviously I had to let Mr. Hickman know.
Well, indeed, I mean, especially considering that, the rest of his Joan of Arc had just turned up, it would almost be rude not to. So, since you back Joan of Arc, Dave, you might be interested in this.
Yeah, because all of the stuff that's in this game can be used in Joan of Arc as well. So, it looked interesting. So I thought, well, that's worth a pop. So, and it does sort of scratch that Joan of Arc itch, because I don't have to do the full try and track down Joan of Arc because I didn't back it.
Well, that's all right, because it's launching its 1.5 in a few days, so you can back it all second time round.
I think I'll wait and, because Ragnarok's going to be out soon.
Yeah, I passed on Joan of Arc as well because of the the big pile of mythic battle stuff I had sitting in my cupboard.
Yeah,
and I'm keeping my powder dry for Ragnarok as well because I know that's going to be crazy.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. So that's what I've been purchasing.
Excellent stuff, most excellent. Right, so talk about if you spotted anything shiny. I was mentioning earlier that I was at the Atlantis stand last weekend, and they were showing a few bits off because I think it's officially launched at Tabletop Gaming Live, which is this weekend, and there's a Kickstarter coming up for it. Atlantis have done a deal with the guys behind Fighting Fantasy. So they are producing a miniatures range based on the characters and the cover art of the Fighting Fantasy books.
Oh no.
Oh dear.
Oh no.
So, for example, they showed me at the weekend the kind of, I'm trying to remember what book it is. There's the book where you've got it's the hooded I think it's a goblin thief on the front. It may even be City of Thieves. And
Thieves.
Yeah, and there's this hooded thief kind of is kind of sideways, kind of looking out of the book. Bottom line is, what they've done is they've looked at the cover art and the illustrations of the characters in many of the Fighting Fantasy books, and they're going to be kickstarting a miniatures range based on them.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be bad
nice.
for a lot
of. Of course, Atlantis are pretty decent miniatures company. So yes.
Death Trap Dungeon was such a big thing for me when I was younger. Death Trap Dungeon, I loved it. I can see myself.
They have. I've seen the one they've done for Death Trap Dungeon. Yeah, the thing coming out of on the cover of Death Trap Dungeon. Yeah, that's there. There's so many. Yeah, there's they got the old Warlock from Firetop Mountains in there and all sorts of stuff.
Actually, have you actually seen the apps you can get for the iPhone or iPad for the Fighting Fantasy books? Have you seen the apps you can download for that?
Yes, I have. I have the one. I do own one with. I think I had about eight of the books in. I'm no better at them. Age doesn't improve things much.
No. I unfortunately, like I talked about Death Trap Dungeon, that was one of my favourite ones, but I never ever actually finished it. I never made it through to the end, which is to my eternal shame. I never made it to the end of Death Trap Dungeon. I always died.
Yeah, I've been. I've had another couple of recent goes at Warlock at Firetop Mountain, and failed 2 or 3 times. And it's just like, no, I'm still rubbish at these. Although, to be fair, they are designed to kill you. They are designed to,
Yeah. That's what I reckon is. Yes, it's stacked against us. I think that's definitely it, Neil.
Yeah. So that's my shiny. That's unfortunately I don't have the literature in front of me, but keep your eyes open. That is launching on Kickstarter very, very soon.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I'll be keeping an eye on that one.
Anybody else got anything shiny that has come to their attention over the last couple of recently?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things if you want.
Go on then.
Go for it.
Something I just discovered. I mean, you guys have been talking about full thrust, and that's something also that I've got a bit of an interest in. I've got a bunch of the old Star Trek Mongoose games or something like that, or whatever it is. I've got a whole heap of the I've got Klingon and the Federation fleet. But what I saw I think it popped up on Twitter, Mill Geek Designs. That's MILL Mill Geek Designs, all one word, .com. It's a guy that designs 3D printed space fleets and other bits and pieces. And looking at his website, he has a fantastic Battlestar Galactica range. Not the old 1970s version. It's the modern, 2000s series. There is a huge range of Earth and Xylon ships and fighters and everything. 3D prints. They all look really, really, really nice. And then I think he does another range which is kind of similar to the old Star Blazers sort of spaceship Yamato stuff. Earth versus the Gamelons or whatever they call them. So there's some fantastic looking figures there, which I think I'm going to have to throw some money towards. So that's beautiful. Mill Geek Designs. And the other one I just saw recently is the Victrix World War II 12 mil.
Yeah, that popped up today, didn't it?
Yeah, I thought the first thing I thought was 12 mil? Really?
Exactly.
Oh, no.
It was like, yeah. Of all the scales to choose, especially when they turned around and said, "Yeah, we're launching a new company, Victrix Games, and we're launching a brand new range of World War II vehicles, and we'll choose a scale that almost nobody else does."
I thought it was stupid. I mean, if they do a fully extensive range, then yeah, okay, fair enough. Someone who's new to gaming, they could look at 12 mil and go, oh yeah, that's not bad, and they can pick up a lot of things. But considering most people have either 20 mil, 15 mil, or 6 mil even, it just seems a very risky decision to make, especially the amount of money they've got to spend on making plastic molds. To invest that much money on molds for a scale which no one has is quite risky, I would have thought.
Yeah, I wonder whether it's because the obvious scale to do that. If you're going to go below 15, the obvious scale is 10 mil.
Yeah.
I just wonder whether, because they're doing it in plastics, whether they couldn't get the level of detail if they went down to 10 mil with things like gun barrels and stuff. So maybe that's why. But I mean, there are 12 mil out there because it's N gauge, isn't it, for trains?
Yeah,
I think,
because it is true. It is true N gauge, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, some people argue, you can use N gauge with 10 mil, but no, N gauge is actually 12 mil, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure they've done their own work. So,
well, I mean, I can't see myself buying any of it because I play 15 mil or 6 mil or even 3 mil, but I couldn't see myself starting another scale for World War II. But I hope it does work for them because Victrix quality is fantastic. So it should be very good quality. But I just thought it was a very risky decision to go with a completely different scale.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, let's see what happens. But it's interesting. They got a game coming out end of the year, I think. Or was it for beginning next year?
What, World War II game?
Yeah. That's what they're doing. Is a 1-to-1 World War II game.
Pretty saturated market though, isn't it? With Flames of War, Battle Group, everything else. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course they're starting in Normandy.
Oh, shocking indeed, horror. Yes.
Yeah, but no, I mean, not many people play Pacific, really, do they? I guess it's, I mean, not at the scale that you would be playing with 12 mil. I mean, I can understand people playing Chain of Command in the Pacific with a platoon running around in the jungle, but there isn't really the tank heavy gains that you get in the Western Front or the Eastern Front. So it's a logical starting point, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens with that one. That could be, that could either be something that takes off, or it could be a bit of a white elephant. You never know.
Well, fingers crossed it works for them.
Yes, indeed. I hope it does. Yeah, but right. Thank you, Neil. How about you, Mr. Hobbs? Anything?
No, the only thing I was going to mention was the Victrix news. But yeah, that's it. That's it for me.
Cool. Well, in that case, then, having got now through the confessionals and got several things off our chest, it's time now to chat about what we've been up to in the hobby recently.
Right after this break.
Hi everyone, Neil here. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you are, I'm wondering, would you consider becoming a patron of the show? For as little as $1 a month, you can help support us in what we're doing with the show. For that, you can get access to a monthly question and answer show, and that will also allow you to ask questions. If you pledge more, you potentially get bonus podcasts. And you never know, you might even get invited to be on the show yourself. If you want to know more details, please follow the link to our Patreon page, which is on the front of the website. That's www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. Thanks a lot. Okay, so we've reached that time of the show where it's time to chat about what we've been up to in the hobby, what we've been playing, what we've been painting, anything else we've kind of discovered along the way, really. So, I'll kick off. It's going to be relatively short and sweet. I have actually managed to paint something. Shocking indeed, horror. So, I was saying I kind of started dragging myself out of this kind of strange hobby funk I've been in recently by starting to do some scenery. So I put some scenery together for Journeys in Middle-earth, and then off the back of that I suddenly went, well, actually the new miniatures, those 3 character figures that they did, decided to paint those. So I had a play around with various stuff, including playing around. That was my first dabble with contrast paints. With, I think it has to be said, I thought mixed results.
They're a little bit tricky to get the hang of at first.
Yeah, I was really impressed with there's a guy called Atarin who is kind of a human wizard or fighter, and I painted him in kind of basically black bronze and with a red cloak, and I used the new Blood Angels red on his cloak, and that worked brilliantly. That is a lovely colour.
Yeah, that red's really nice. Yeah,
it's really vibrant red, isn't it? And it just works really well. I was really impressed with that. Everybody was raving about the Black Templar, and I used it, and primarily originally it was to paint a black wolf, and I was surprised just how grey it dries. Now, whether or not it's a case of I'm not using it completely correctly, I don't know. But for me, I was expecting it to dry a lot darker than it was, whereas essentially it seemed to dry a dark grey. Obviously, it was still kind of, you still had highlights and highlights and stuff. But basically, in order to get it looking like a black wolf, I then had to wash it with dark tone, which I'm thinking, don't think this was the idea.
What was your undercoat?
On that, I used a grey undercoat.
Okay, should have worked.
I used a light grey undercoat. I mean, I'll try other things because I mean, obviously, the big things I'm going to use it on are is Under Armour for Stormtroopers. So.
Oh yeah, it worked for that perfectly.
Yeah, that's kind of why really why I bought it. So it was.
Yeah, there's a guy on Twitter, Sonic Sledgehammer. If you follow him, he painted a stormtrooper using contrast paints, and it came up brilliantly.
I've got some of the I've got some of the white, because I know I think when they first came out, looking at several people, I know Luke's APS. I don't know if you've seen any of his on his YouTube channel. He said they were his experience with contrast paints was they were a very mixed bag, but he thought the black was probably the best thing out there. So it worked kind of well. I used it for scale, mate. I used it for like scale armor as well on one of the figures. That kind of worked. So, but yeah, I was just a bit surprised that it dried lighter than I expected it to. But now I know that. I think in future it will. I think I'll be all right. So, managed to get a little bit of painting done. Haven't played a lot for one reason or another. We haven't managed to get many ducks in a row as far as gaming is concerned. So, actually, the major thing we did, I finally got Journeys in Middle-earth back to the table with Josh. It's been a long time since we played that, but we wanted to get back into our second campaign. And had a game of that the other night, which was very good. So that's really it. I've just recorded a diary for the patron listeners get, where I'm kind of at the point of thinking, at times it's almost like, have I got too much stuff? Because I'm kind of in that quandary of, right, I need to start something. What do I start? Which way do I jump? And and it's almost like I've got too many projects which I haven't started yet. And it's like okay, so just choose one, And I'm kind of struggling which way to jump at the moment on that. But I'll get something underway.
Do something small. Nice little war band. Maybe your Budgies and Barrows.
Yeah, I have just
Bows and Badges.
Bows and Badges. I have just started painting some of those, and of course, there is a Kickstarter due for those, launching towards the end of October, I believe, for the next set of miniatures. So yeah, I was either going to do that, or maybe to be honest, go back and do some more fantasy stuff for Rangers of the Shadow Deep.
Yeah, just do something small.
Yeah,
something 6-8 figures. Once you finish them, do something else.
And crack on. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, keeps you motivated because you feel like a sense of accomplishment. You've got one project done, and then it spurs you on to the next one.
Yeah. Don't try and do like 1,000 figures. All for the same
I found that I actually cleared up my painting table and got rid of a lot of projects. I had too many sort of projects on the table at once, and it kind of really saps your energy when you look at all the different things that you got to do. So I cleared off my old table, and I think I've only got 2 projects sitting on my table. So it just looks like it's more achievable. Then you can kind of just concentrate on those 2, get out of the way, clear it off the table straight away, and then bring on something else.
Yes. I mean, talking of which, actually, Mr. Hughes, you've been a bit of a painting machine recently, haven't you? You've really been cranking stuff out, haven't you? Or so it seems to me.
Yeah, I pretty much paint every day, at least something. I've actually had a pretty productive year this year. The painting tally's looking pretty healthy at the moment.
So what have you been painting recently? And so you were saying that you've invested heavily in contrast paints. So what's been your experience with them?
I mean, I've done quite a few bits with contrast paints. I think I've done some historical stuff. I've painted up an English Civil War, a couple of English Civil War cavalry units, and a pike and shot regiment and a commanded shot. I've done all that with contrast paints.
Yeah,
Um,
sorry to interrupt, because you said in particular you found they were really good for doing horses.
Mm.
Very good for horses. Yeah. So you do. I think it's the what's it called? The brown. I've just got him here in front of me. The Gall Grunter fur is a really nice brown, and then the snakebite leather. I think those two, and even the black. You just you slap that on. You can mix a little bit of the darker colours. If you want to do a bay horse, you can mix it in and do the darker parts of the legs. No, they're fantastic for horses. So I've done a fair bit of that. I did some Saga civilians or Dark Ages civilians using contrast and some fantasy stuff. I think they do require a little bit of getting used to because they're a very they're a thick wash, so they're a bit runnier than a normal paint. So it does require a bit more of a steady hand when you're applying it because you can't let it sort of spill into other areas. You have to be a bit careful how you apply it.
Yeah.
And also generally if you're painting a figure, like you might start by, you kind of have to paint from the inside of the figure out, and so you might start with your doing all the flesh colors, and then the next color you pick a different area of the model, so you're not painting near areas which are still drying, because then there's always a possibility that the two washes will sort of like run into each other and then it'll spoil the effect. So you have to be a little bit more careful when you apply the contrast, but basically it's a real time saver. I mean, you still might go back with normal Vallejo paints or whatever and apply a few details, but for most of the major areas of the figure, you can paint with the contrasts, and it speeds the whole process. I mean, my normal painting technique is to do undercoat, do a nice, neat paint base coat, and then I apply a wash with Agrax or Army Painter. And then I just go back and do a single highlight, and that's all I finish. So I find with the contrasts, I can skip the Agrax Earth shade step and just go from the contrast straight to a highlight. So that saves time. I have seen the Sonic Sledgehammer I mentioned before has done some very nice things with contrast paints. And what he's done, which doesn't necessarily speed the process up, but it's a nice effect, is he applies the contrast paints, and then after it's dry, he then goes and does an Agrax Earth shade wash over everything, and it kind of ties it all together and just gives it a bit more shading again, and that comes up quite nice. So I've done quite a bit of the contrast stuff, and I think, I mean, it's not a panacea for everything. I think it's just another tool in the shed or in the box, and I think all my painting from now on will be a mixture of normal paints, contrasts, regular washes. It's just going to be another thing that goes into the arsenal. So I've done a lot of contrast stuff. As far as projects that I'm working on now, I've got odds and ends for Rangers of Shadowdeep and Frostgrave. So I've got a couple of ogres and some wizards on my table at the moment. I've got a couple of figures for Mythic Battles as I slowly work through the mountain of figures to paint for that game. And the other thing I've got on my painting table is a bunch of 6mm Bacchus Napoleonic British and French, which I'm slowly painting up for use with Blucher. They're the main projects I've got going on the painting table at the moment. But yeah, pretty productive year. I keep track of predominantly the 28mm stuff I paint. It's a bit harder to keep track of the 6mm and the smaller stuff that I paint, but I'm up to, I think, 254 figures for the year, which is,
that's pretty good.
I think that's better. That's better than one figure a day. I mean, still probably not as good an output as Mr. Hobbs, but he seems to be a painting machine. But I'm pretty happy that I'm churning out, figures on a pretty regular basis these days.
Cool. Yeah, because
that's the main thing.
Because you got me into that, you swine.
I didn't start that. I can't remember who actually came up with that, but I definitely embraced it.
Yeah, and then you happened to mention, said Neil, what? Yeah, it will. Yeah, I'd be interested to know, what your kind of output is like. Why don't you do this to encourage yourself? Yeah, thanks for that, Neil. So I've been doing that I think I started that a year, start 2018 because of you. So that's
Yeah, it does get a little bit embarrassing when you see painted like 20 and purchased negative 750 or something. That can be a bit disheartening.
Yeah,
but no, I find it good. I mean, it's one of these sort of obsessive OCD sort of things, but I've kept track. I've been doing the painting tally now for about 3 or 4 years. And I think I've painted just over 1,000 figures, but I bought about 3,000, so I've still got a long way to go.
It's not just me then. Good.
No, it's not just you. But I am being better this year. I haven't. Almost every figure I bought recently, I have painted almost straight away. So I've just recently finished some Mars Attacks figures for. I'm going to be using them in playing Supersystem, and so I painted them up. And got them on the table, and I wanted to buy some more, and I bought that and painted them up straight away. Unfortunately, Mantic have just redesigned their website, and so I went there thinking, pick up a few more things for Mars Attacks, and they've discontinued the entire range. So
really,
now I have, it's gone. I sent them an email saying, I just noticed that the Mars Attacks stuff's not on the page. Are you going to be re-releasing this? And they said, no, out of production. So it's off to eBay where the prices are already skyrocketing. They do one of the units they have is a science division where you get this cool sort of Mars Attacks Martian in the sort of mad scientist uniform. And I thought, that'd be a great unit to get. And I think when it was on sale, it was like £20 or something. And now it's like $100 Australian or something like that for 10 figures, which is a bit rich for my blood. So... so it's all already starting to get expensive on eBay.
Unfortunately, that does seem to be the thing with some of these kind of, an IP either does well or it doesn't, and I suppose if it doesn't, I mean, obviously, you kind of get the impression that was, it all kind of came out at once and was a bit of a flash in the pan, really.
Yeah, I was able to pick up a lot of the things that I wanted. So I got I got one of the flying saucers, and I got the big stompy robot, which is a great figure. And I just recently bought one of the things in Mars Attacks is they if you not in the movie but in the original trading cards, one of the things was that they would mutate insects and get giant insects.
Yes.
So I picked up a giant mutant ant, which with the contrast paints, I painted in like 2 minutes. It was like slap on that blood red that you were talking about, and then paint the eyes, and that was pretty much it. The figure was done. It was painted in really quick fashion with a contrast paint. But like you said, the IP's probably gone, or the license is probably expired now. So it's off to eBay. I have to go.
Oh dear.
Have you been? So that's what you've been kind of painting. Have you been gaming anything recently?
A little bit. I kind of lost my. You talk about painting mojo. I've kind of lost my gaming mojo a little bit. It's been hard to get motivated to sort of go to the club to play games. So I did play a game of Supersystem a couple of weeks ago. I was planning to play a game last night, but I cancelled it because I had to prepare for some podcast apparently. And the only gaming really I've been doing with my son. Like I said, he's been taking interest in wargaming again. So we've been playing. We played a little bit of Blucher with the cards. We played a bit of DBA with the DBA 3.0, which, like I said before, is actually a very good set of rules once you decipher the Barcarese, which hasn't improved much. It's still terribly written. But it's still, once you decipher it, it's a very, very good game. But so I played a bit of DBA, played a bit of Blucher, played a bit of a game called Age of Hannibal, which is what we initially started playing until we realized that it's probably better just to play DBA. And that's been most of my gaming. I think the biggest highlight, I suppose, in the last couple of months was we did a really big English Civil War game where we did a refight of the Battle of Edgehill.
Oh, cool.
Where we had, I think we had 8 players, I think in total, 4 players per side. I think it was something like 40 odd units in 28mm, and that was a really, really good game. That actually pretty much repeated the historical outcome. So I was pretty happy with that. That was probably the highlight of the gaming year so far. But no, it's just hard getting motivated. I'm kind of enjoying my painting more than gaming actually at the moment.
How about you, Mr. Hobbs?
Not a huge amount. Let's have a look.
You see, that's such a relative statement.
Yeah. Well, painting-wise, I finished my Thousand Suns Army for my mad 30k Siege of Burning the Postpro project.
Yeah.
So they're done. Good. I've been painting up the Aeronautica Imperialis planes, which are lovely. Oh, they're so much fun. I've done the Imperial one, so you get 2 fighters, 2 bombers for the Imperials. And I've done them sort of like a mottled grey camo on top. With the fighters I've done with sort of yellow edging, a bit like an ME-109 styling.
Oh, good. Yeah,
that sort of styling. Blue under, the wings. Painted those, completely traditionally. I decided to make them really dirty. I thought I was just going to make them really scuffy and dirty and, use quite heavy weathering. So I've done those, and then over the last couple of days I've started painting the orcs. So, I've done the 3 sort of orc fighter jets, which again are lovely little models, and they've all been done with contrast.
Right.
Well, yeah, they look quite good.
Yeah, well, should we say the base has been done with contrast? I found a recipe on the Firestorm Games YouTube channel, painting them up, and paint them up lovely. And then once I put the base coats on, then I just sort of went a bit mad on the weathering with like lots of sort of smoke and smoke markings and dust and dirt and rust, and basically turned a very pretty little plane into a flying scrap heap.
Because the Emperor's budget never actually extends to maintenance, does it? In the universe.
Exactly. So I've done those. I've made a start on a Reaver Titan. So I'm sticking to my 6mm till 2020. So we say not competition. Pledge, that's it. Yeah. So that's all going well. So I'm going to get this Reaver done.
Okay, I mean, how as far as the planes are concerned, because I mean, I must admit, the one thing that always makes me shudder when it comes down to planes, and I've seen so many paint jobs already for Aeronautica Imperialis. The one thing that always gives me nightmares is panel lines.
That's what you use washes for.
Yeah, just a wash.
Yeah, I use, for the Imperials, for the grey armour, I actually use some Foundry colours. I use Foundry Napoleonic Gun Grey.
Yeah.
And just paint on the dark shades, give it a light coat of the light one on top, which again brings out the panel lines. I stippled it then with a darker grey. And then once that's dry, I just do a wash of, I mix non-oil GW wash with their medium, bloody medium, 50-50. And it basically goes on like a filter wash, put it all over the top of that. And then for, the underwings and stuff, the blues, I used, I think it's a Prussian blue colour. Again, just use a mix of blue and a black wash together for that. Put that over the top, and it, goes that way. So no, don't mess around. Panel lines, and with the contrast on the orcs, even easy. You just slap it on.
Yeah,
you just slapped on the yellow colour. It's done. So yeah, don't sweat it. This is what you use filter washes for.
Yeah, I almost came away with that from Derby because we had one of the guys from Balls and Sauce Hobbies.
Yeah.
Because I had it out on the table, and as I said on Twitter, you didn't tell me that the planes were mounted on ball joints as standard.
I didn't think it was important.
What?
I didn't realise that you had this weird compulsion about ball jointed planes, Neil.
Well, I mean, it's such a cool little thing.
Yeah.
It was just like, oh my word, yeah, and the fact that they thought about it and done it,
Yeah.
as opposed to just having it's just on a flight stand.
I've even gone in and painted the bottoms of the flight stands as well.
Oh, okay.
I've unclipped them and just sort of gave them a gold spray and a green wash over the top, so it had sort of dirty bronzy colour. Yeah.
Did you
all the
play the
little
game?
details.
Did you play the game back in the old days?
Yeah. Yeah, I used to really like it.
I never played it. Never really. I did think about it at one point when I was doing my epic stuff for Imperial Guard. I thought, yeah, I'd like to get some of those old planes, but I think the new ones are quite a bit bigger than the old ones, aren't they?
Yeah, they have grown over the preceding years. As with anything the GW does.
Yeah.
But no, it's a fun game.
Are they compatible scale wise with the new Titans and all that? Would they be similar scales for that? You could combine them in the same game?
You can't combine them in the same game, but they are the same scale.
Okay.
What was it?
Oddly enough.
Hang on. Or is that more of a case of you can't combine them in the same game yet?
Yes. Yeah. I'm sure. Well, you know, I guess it's the fact that they are sticking with the Templar Titanicus being in the 30k universe, whereas this is very much in the 40k universe.
Yes.
Is there any rumors of ground vehicles and other stuff for the Adeptus Titanicus range, or are they just sticking to the Titans?
There's no. I mean, I've heard people sort of saying, "Oh, they have to do epic," but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they might do a sort of 30k figures for there.
But there's no like orc stompers or anything like that planned. If it's just chaos and empire, isn't it, at the moment?
Yeah, well, the sort of Horus Heresy stuff was just marine on marine, so there was no, it wasn't like the chaos that you get in 40k. This is just turned a bit wonky, So it was just a big galactic civil war. So it'd be quite easy to incorporate smaller figures into Titanicus because they only have to do a very limited range of sort of marines, a couple of tanks, and that's about it.
I'm sharing my Warhammer 40k ignorance. So I didn't get so much into the whole backstory and the Horus Heresy and all that stuff. So I only sort of know it very superficially.
Yeah, no, it's sort of 40k when you get all of the alien races appearing. Early 30k stuff is just human on human stuff, and the same uniforms, just different colours. Yeah.
Going back to Aeronautica, by the way, did you happen to notice the latest map from Deep Cut?
Oh yeah, I haven't ordered it, but I have noticed.
Really? You shock me, sir.
I'm being good.
You're being good. Or you've been distracted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's painting.
Yeah.
And now one game, which was fun enough tonight. Actually,
half a game.
Most of a game, and that was Jeff at the Eagle's Nest. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Jeff.
I don't actually know whether he listens, I'll be honest. And he invited me over to test out his game that he's running for the Lead Adventurers Forum get together. I think it's called BAM Forum meeting. So it's a Rebels and Patriots game. In the American-Mexican War, 1860, 1840s.
Yeah.
Oh, about the Alamo time.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1840s.
Yeah, which was very pretty. It was lovely. I got completely slaughtered. I was the Mexicans. Mexicans run away a lot. Or they do when I play them. But yeah, a great game. Looked beautiful. You know, it's Jeff and his mate Keith's figures, beautifully painted, loads of character. A firm called, I think most of them came from Boot Hill Miniatures,
Oh, okay.
which is a company I've never heard of before. They sort of remind me of Knuckle Duster figures.
Yeah.
They're
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
that style.
Yeah, because that's quite a stylistic sculpt, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, just beautiful. And yeah, great game. I had to leave a little bit early.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I wonder why that was.
Yeah. So yeah, but yeah. So here I am. So, I'm sorry, Jeff, I had to leave early, but he pretty much dead at that stage.
Right. Very good.
The game had gone very badly. I mean, it started off with sort of my first activation. So you can. It's one of those games where you roll 2d6 to activate your unit.
Yeah.
You're looking for sort of 6 or 7 or thereabouts. But if you roll a double one, it's bad things happen table. So I think I did that 3 times during the first couple of turns, and basically ended up with one of my units shooting my artillery unit, making them to run away, and then I had some skirmishers bolt off the table because they got scared, and then I shot another one of my units. So yeah, and that was on the first 2 turns.
It's probably best that you did finish early, because there's nothing worse when you know that you're going to lose a game, but you realise that you've got probably at least another hour of playing the same game before you actually do officially lose, but you know that you've lost it so early on, but it just takes all the fun out of it, doesn't it?
Oh God, no! I absolutely adore it. I love chaos like that, and I was doing quite well. I was sort of holding them up, and I'd take one of the objectives, and then it all just sort of crumbled away. But it was any sort of chaotic thing like that really makes me laugh. It's just a case of, okay, what do I do now? And sometimes you just gotta go, let's just see what happens. Yeah, great game tonight.
Right, brilliant. Okay, so we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, it is time for the main subject of the evening, which of course is, as we previously mentioned, we're going to take a look at Supersystem. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is proud to be sponsored by Firestorm Games. Whether you need wargames rules, miniatures, paints, hobby accessories, scenery, board games, card games, all your role-playing needs, and even toys and collectibles, Firestorm Games is your store of choice. Check them out at www.firestormgames.co.uk or at their stores located in Cardiff, Newport and Swindon. Don't forget, if you use the code MEEPLELEAF, that's MEEPLELEAF, all lowercase, you will get an extra discount on your order. Firestorm Games, for all your hobby goodness. Well, we are here at the main part of the show. Now, when we do these Patreon specials, when we once we have decided upon our next victim, the next thing, because we actually turn around to them and say, what would you like to discuss? So, after we rejected the first 2 or 3 ideas from Neil as being far too controversial.
Hey, if you want controversy, listen to this. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
That's my emergency sandpaper in case things get a little bit out of hand. That's for you, Mr. Whitaker, if you're listening.
We've lost him. He's gone.
Inspired. Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Hughes. That was brilliant. Right, okay. Yes, so...
I'll just shove it back into my pants now so no one can see it.
Fine.
Oh, this is too cricket, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Hobbs. Yes. Yes. Yeah, anyway. Right, so, we finally alighted on the subject that Neil has hinted at a couple of times already on the show, Supersystem, which is something that I don't believe either myself or Mr. Hobbs actually knows that much about, do we, sir?
No, this is all new to me.
All new, which is a fine thing, because, you know, when you've got somebody who's been steeped in the game that we know nothing about, it gives us something to find out about, and perhaps a slippery slope to start upon. You never know. So, Mr. Hughes, lead us gently by the hand into the realms of Supersystem. What is it all about?
Well, Supersystem, as the name suggests, is a superhero miniatures game. So it's a sort of what you would call a sort of gang skirmish type game where players create a super team of maybe 3 to 5 characters. You can just start up your own characters.
A Fantastic Four, if you wish.
Exactly. Yes, definitely. And you basically, it's a tabletop game. You have lots of fun bashing each other up, picking up trucks and throwing them at each other, and just generally causing mayhem on the city streets. So it's something that I've probably only been playing a bit over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But this year I've played it quite a few times, and I think the more I play it, the more I like it, and I think it's a great system. It captures the genre brilliantly. I think everything you can possibly think of as far as superhero gaming goes, it's in there. All the standard sort of cliches or tropes are in there, but in a good way as well, not like in a bad way. Yeah, it's just a fun game. It's a good sort of like a evening game for an hour or so. You can go into it as deep as you want. You can spend a lot of time developing your characters and tweaking the powers and all that sort of stuff. So you can have as much fun tweaking your characters. I get a lot more out of it by creating my own superheroes rather than saying, okay, I'm going to have the Incredible Hulk for a game. You actually create your own super teams and off you go. And I think it's great to do a sort of an RPG light sort of game. So, yeah, it's perfect for the superhero genre type gaming.
Okay, cool. So, does it have its own particular set of miniatures, or is it a case of it's a set of rules for a genre, and obviously there are a number of genre miniatures available? What's the kind of setup for the game?
It's pretty generic. There's no the Supersystem. I think Old Glory in the US have some arrangement for distributing it, and I think there is a small range of miniatures produced by Old Glory for Supersystem. but they're all fairly generic. So you've got guys in leotard type guys, so you can kind of paint them however you want.
Yeah.
There aren't really that many sort of named characters in their range. They're all still a fairly generic. So you can essentially use whatever figures you want. So if you wanted to do some sort of time traveling Greek hero, you could grab a character out of the Mythic Battles box set and just play that. Or you could take a god out of the Mythic Battles and you can create a god to go on your table. What I've actually done is, because I wanted to sort of do this gaming on the cheap, is HeroClix figures, the old superhero HeroClix.
Yeah.
They're great to, you could obviously just play them as is, but I normally take those as a starting point, and then I convert them. I paint them in different colors or add a little bit of green stuff to change the costumes a little bit. And but I normally rip them off the old HeroClix bases and put them on proper bases. So I've got like every time we have our sort of gaming day where people are clearing out old stuff, I'll pick up a handful of HeroClix superhero characters for like a couple of dollars because they're so cheap. And then they just sit in a big box in my garage, and I just pull them out and go get inspired. And I go, okay, yeah, I'll rip the base off this one, put them on a base, repaint it, and come up with a character for it. So my actual superhero teams that I've created have cost me, pennies really. And yeah, but there's nothing to stop you using, official figures from like the Marvel games or the Hellboy games or anything like that. You can definitely use those figures. But yeah, I just use the HeroClix stuff mainly.
There's also crossover miniatures as well.
Yeah. There's it's interesting. There isn't that many superhero miniature suppliers that I've come across. Most of the superhero stuff comes from the big sort of like board games or the HeroClix sort of what's that, WizKids or whatever they're called. Yeah, most of it comes from that. There isn't that many superhero characters. I keep hoping that what's his name, Kev from is it Hassle-Free? Yeah, he does some beautiful figures, and I'm hoping one day he will do some superheroes because that he's such a good sculptor, particularly the female form, and so you can convert some of his figures to turn into superheroes. But the system, it's a superhero game, but the system is so flexible that you could use exactly the same rule system to play. You could do like a pulp game. You can do Spy-Fi or any sort of the old 70s TV series. You could. There's so many different skills and attributes you can give to characters, but you can pretty much replicate any sort of Spy-Fi or superhero gaming just using these rules. And I know that the actual system they use, it's called the goal system, I think. They have produced a whole range of different rule sets using the same essential mechanics. And I think they do cover things like pulp gaming and science fiction gaming as well. So it's a pretty flexible toolbox or system, I should say.
That's cool. So I suppose we should make a start really and look at the rules.
Yeah, just a quickie. What size table do you normally play on?
We typically play on a 6x4. We're very fortunate that one of the guys are.
Yeah, that's when you were saying, it's like half a dozen guys aside, and then we're playing 6x4. Like, wow.
But it's like Gangs of Rome, where you've got 5 figures, but the real star of the show is Rome, isn't it? You've got all the buildings, and so for Supersystem, we could definitely play on as small as a 3x3, probably if you've just got a small team. But once you start picking up trucks and throwing them across the table and stuff like that, it's nice to have the 6x4 where we've got a big, nice sort of cityscape set up. So the terrain is probably the biggest thing of the game. That's probably where you probably end up spending most of your money because you only need like 5 figures for a team. And then you spend all your money on MDF buildings and what have you.
Yeah, because the range of a truck in 28 now it's more than 2 foot, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, when you get to be superheroes, because that's the best thing about this game is when you start picking up things and throwing them at each other. That's such good fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, particularly when you pick up a truck, and rather than throwing it at someone, you actually club them over the head with it. So
Yeah,
like Hulk style, sort of like, bang, 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 bang with a truck. It's just fun.
I'm liking the idea of this already.
Yeah, yeah. So do you want me to just go through basics of the mechanics of it, or?
Yeah, let's make a start really on sort of the rules. So, what's the sort of turn sequence? Is it I go, you go? Is it alternate activation?
So it's an alternate activation. So essentially, like I said, everyone has a team, so that it's typically, like I said, 4 or 5 characters per team.
Okay.
You can have more figures than that, so you can have what they call henchman groups, where instead of having one character, you might have like 10, goons or whatever you want to call them, and they're characterized as just like one character. But you have, say, 4 or 5, and then you just have an initiative roll at the start of the turn, and then whoever wins, it's just then alternating activation. So I activate a character, your opponent activates a character, and you just go back and forth. So it's alternate activation on individual characters.
And when you activate a character, do you do all of the actions for that character, or do you say, right, in this phase we just move, and then in the next phase I'll activate one to do some combat or some shooting or something? Or do you say, right, I'm going to activate this figure, it's got a number of actions it can take, and it'll take all those actions?
Yeah, so each character has what they call activation points, which is based on a couple of their characters' attributes, gives you an AP score, and then you can spend them during your activation. So you can spend them just for movement, you can spend them to attack, you can spend them to use a particular skill or power, do a particular combat maneuver, or you can even do what they call a held action, where you kind of reserve some of your action points for later in the game when it's not your character's activation. So it's kind of like an Overwatch type effect, where you might prime a power, and then when a character stumbles across your field of view, you can then shoot at them or do something like that. Or it might be a defensive action, where you've got like a force dome, where you're reserving some of your action points for later in the games as a defensive mechanism. So yeah, you've got typically most characters have somewhere in the order of 7 or 8 or 9 action points which they can spend during an activation.
And I'm kind of guessing for all your characters, there's sort of like a list of stats. They have special abilities, obviously. So is there sort of like a way of sort of tracking that easily?
Yeah, so I mean, you'll have a little a character roster for all of your characters. I mean, it's an RPG light type game. So
Yeah.
every character has a range of attributes. So you've got strike, strength, dodge, toughness, mind, resolve, and sense. They're your main 7 key attributes. And then on top of that, and those attributes basically determine how many dice you can roll in different things like combat or what have you. And on top of that, you can spend points acquiring certain powers or skills, which may have their own certain costs to activate. It's a combination. You spend your points to use those different powers or attributes. The basic mechanic is this, what they call the goal system. I think that's what they call it. I'm pretty sure it is. Essentially, it can either be a target roll. So say you take an example in the scenario where you have to find a hidden bomb that's going to explode, and you're trying to do a searching action. You that might require a roll against your sense attribute. Like you're doing a search, you're rummaging through a garbage bin, you're looking for this bomb, and you want to know if you're successful in finding the object. That's a targeted sort of goal roll. So what you do is you might be rolling against your sense attributes. So say you've got a sense of, say, 4, you roll 4 dice, and to succeed, depending on the scenario, you might have a target number. It might be 3, for example. So you roll your 4 dice, and you're looking to get 3 successes to make that to do that roll. So you're rolling 1d6. It's just a 1d6 base game. And a success is four or higher. So if you roll 4, 5, or 6, it's one success. If you roll a 6, that's 2 successes. So you get that extra little bonus of rolling sixes. So in example there, where you're finding trying to find the bomb, you roll your 4 sense dice, and if you get 3 successes, you succeed in whatever you were trying to do. So that's like that's a standalone sort of skill check. But then also when you're in combat or range combat, you do opposed rolls where I'm trying to hit you, so I'll roll my strike dice, and you're trying to dodge, so you roll your dodge dice, and whoever's got the most goals, if I'm the attacker, if I get more goals than you, I hit you, and then you roll for damage and so on. So that's basically the mechanic, is this goal system where you're looking to get successes, and it's like if you've got more successes than your opponent, then you win. That's essentially the mechanic for everything.
That's cool. So nice and simple, but it gives you the ability to add in a lot of flavour.
Yeah, and also certain attributes. So, for example, once you get above 6 on a particular attribute, that goes into the realm of what they call a superpower. So, if you got a strike of 6, you have to, as part of your character development, you have to take at least 1 level of super. And that 1 level of super can unlock other powers that you can spend points on. But in the game, it actually gives you rerolls. So if you've got a strike of 6 with 2 levels of super, you roll 6 dice and you can reroll 2 of them. So, and then also super also incurs extra benefits on things like when you knock people back and so on, they get knocked back extra further because you've got these superpowers. So yeah, so it's essentially it's a success roll with the opportunity to have some rerolls as well. So it's a pretty simple mechanic that you pick up very quickly.
Yeah, it's a sort of going back to sort of the army creation bit. It's just sort of like a asynchronous where you would normally have a small group of superheroes versus a villain with lots of minions, or vice versa. Have you got that ability, or is it just planned around every character is a superhero? There's no other,
No, you can definitely do henchman groups. In fact, the last game I played, we had a freeway game where one team was, I think they were just 5 sort of super villains, and then another team was 3 super villains, but they had this big giant robot that they could sort of go into, kind of like Voltron or Power Rangers type sort of arrangement. And then my team was a Mars Attacks Force. So essentially, I had the Martian General, so he was like one character, and then I had a big giant stompy Martian robot. That was another character. I had a Martian flying saucer. That was another character. And then I had 2 henchman teams, which were like your Martian grunts running around with ray guns. And I think so they were like 10 Martian grunts in a henchman group. And so, yeah, you can have a combination of the lot. In fact, one of my plans is I want to expand my Mars Attacks Force to probably almost twice the size and do a really big game and have it opposed against sort of 1950s National Guard, American National Guard. So I can pick up a heap of, I've got a box of the old War Games factory US soldiers, which were pretty ordinary figures, but if I give them a basic paint job, they look like 1950s sort of National Guard. So you classic sort of B-grade sci-fi films where the National Guard runs out to fight the alien menace and gets killed en masse by the ray guns. So yeah, I'll probably have a game where you'd have lots of henchmen groups where you've got your US National Guard soldiers against Martian grunts with maybe a couple of superheroes running around just throwing things around. So that would be a pretty fun game to do.
Yeah, it's something. I mean, I've never really played any sort of superhero game, and it's mainly because of that whole thing of it's just superheroes versus superheroes. But if you're pulling in, the whole henchman bit and, the diabolical villain with lots and lots of henchmen who are just going to get, smacked aside,
Oh yeah, they literally do die like flies, but they can also do things like they swarm all over it. So you can imagine like one superhero being swarmed by all these henchmen, and the superheroes having to bash them up, and they're just flying off everywhere. I mean, you don't try and uh, pin your hopes on winning the game on your henchmen, because they literally do just drop like flies.
Yeah,
Which is exactly what you want them to do.
exactly. Yeah. No, yes. No henchmen were injured in this particular game.
Well, actually, one of the cool things I did with my Mars attacks, one of the powers that you can give to a henchman group is a special ability called Another Wave. So essentially, when one of your henchman groups gets wiped out, you get a chance to do a roll, and if you succeed, they all come back on again. So you just got a whole other henchman group that just run onto the table.
Yeah.
So they just can keep coming like waves and waves of these henchmen. So you can do the whole sort of Age of Ultron where the robots are just piling into the superheroes on wave after wave of them. So yeah, it captures that nice little genre quite nicely.
Yeah, as you say, you've got this basic system of rolling a number of dice, looking for fours, and those are your successes, which works for your combat quite nicely, and for your actions that you need to take. So it does sort of feed in quite nicely. I mean, sort of movement is I'm guessing is fairly standard. You say you've got these points to spend. I'm guessing that each point you spend allows you to move so far, or
yeah. So say for example you've got 7 action points. If you wanted to do nothing else in that turn except move, you can move 1 inch for every action point. So you can move 7 inches. You can charge. So if you charge, you get to move 2 inches per action point, and it gives you a free attack at the end of the turn. So if you charge, you get the double movement. If you get into base contact with an opposing unit figure, you can then do an attack, and it doesn't cost you any AP to do that attack as part of the whole charge thing. If you do a attack without charging, then that's normally 3 action points. So you get like a double movement if you do the charge. So yeah, a lot of these things are fairly intuitive. They are kind of what you expect them to be. So spend 1 AP for movement, spend 3 AP for an attack, 2 AP to go and pick up an object or so on. And then you've got different AP for different skills that you want to activate.
Yeah. How does I mean, we mentioned that with combats that you're doing these opposed sort of roles, looking for successes. How does sort of damage work with superheroes?
So when you get into close combat, essentially there's an attacker and a defender. So it's not like only the attacker has the opportunity to hurt the defender. And I think there might be a couple of special powers that allow them to sort of reflect the damage back onto the attacker. But generally, the attacker is the only one who gets a chance to cause damage. So if you're 2 characters in base-to-base combat, for close combat, it's the attacker rolls against his strike attribute, and the defender rolls against their dodge attribute. And you're looking for successes. If you've got super strike, you can get to re-roll, or super dodge, you can re-roll. And then you're looking to see who got the most successes. So if the attacker doesn't beat the defender, then he just missed. And that's when that ends. If he, however, gets at least 1 more success, then he's hit. And if you're lucky to get, say, 3 extra successes, then you get an extra dice to add in when it comes to roll the damage. So if you get 1 extra, if you only beat him by 1, you don't get any extra dice. But if you beat him by 3, you get 1 extra dice. You get 1 extra dice for any additional 2 goals that you got.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to the damage phase, where essentially you roll your strength if it's in close combat. So you might have a strength of, say, 5. If you have a weapon, that weapon might confer extra dice. So that might be, you might have a big sword or something that gives you 3 extra dice you can roll for damage. And then you get your extra goals that you got from the successes earlier. And then you get to roll that, and the defender typically rolls their toughness. And then if the attacker succeeds in getting more goals than the defender again, then that's how many points of damage you do to their, or how many hit points or vitality you take off them. So if you beat them by 2 or 3, then they lose 2 or 3 hit points.
Oh, okay.
And and range combat is almost the same mechanic. There are range bands, obviously, and the further away the defender gets extra dice when they're rolling. Typically, range combat is you rolling your strike again, and the defender's rolling dodge. Also, what comes under range combat is things like mind attacks. So say you do some sort of psionic attack on someone, it's the same sort of thing, but instead of rolling strike, in that case, both of you roll mind, because obviously it's a mind attack thing. And then if you succeed with the goals, then if it's a range combat for damage, because it's not physically hitting someone, you just use the dice that's allocated to that particular range weapon. If it's like some sort of energy blast, you might be rolling 5 dice. And the defender will again roll their toughness, but if it's a mind attack, they actually roll against their resolve ability. And then the same again, if you get more goals, then you damage them.
Okay, so how does that sort of work with the sort of minion units? Do they?
So a henchman group, say you've got 10 henchmen or minions, with whatever you want to call them. Essentially, each minion only has 1 hit point.
Okay.
So if you fire at you target a henchman group, or you punch a henchman group, and after you do all the rolls, you inflict, say, 3 hits, you pretty much kill 3 henchmen. You can spend extra points when you're creating your henchman group, and I think they're classed as veterans, and they get 2 hit points instead of 1. So that makes them just a little bit more resilient. But typically, once you start attacking henchman groups, you start knocking them out pretty quickly. So they are pretty brittle, but they get extra benefits. Like say, for example, my Martians, they're all equipped with ray guns, and they can concentrate their fire, which means they all basically do volley fire at something. So they get to roll extra dice. So they can be quite potent in attack, but they're pretty weak in defense.
Okay. So far, so good. It's sounding fun. What sort of abilities then would you have that you can use for these superheroes?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's almost the sky's the limit when you come to designing your characters.
Oh yeah, it is. In fact, it's probably talking about the character creation. That's probably the most complicated part of the game. Is the bit that getting your head around how you create a character, and you can endlessly tweak them as you play them and see if this works or that doesn't work. Like when I played my Martian force, the last game I played, my big stompy robot was incredibly strong, but then I found out that he was quite vulnerable to mind attacks. So he didn't actually get physically taken out. He basically got his brain fried, and so that was the end of my big stompy robot, which was a little bit disappointing. So but what I've decided, I went back and reviewed his stats, and I can take a particular power called Soulless, which costs you a certain number of points, and it basically means that they're immune to any sort of mind attacks because they're just a soulless evil Martian. So mind attacks don't work on them. So I'm going to put that ability on my big stompy robot, so he'll be immune to that sort of Achilles heel that he had in the last game. Yeah. It's also briefly mentioning as far as the combat. So I talked about the combat, close combat and range combat. That's pretty standard. The mechanics very similar. You can spend AP for certain combat maneuvers. So these are things that everyone can do. They're not specific power things, where you can do something like aim, where you can spend AP to increase the chance of hitting someone. You can do concentrated fire, as I mentioned before, like with the henchman groups. You can dive for cover, so obviously that gives you cover from shooting. You can do a flurry maneuver, which is lots of quick punches. So that's good when you're fighting henchmen. You can do like a flurry of blows to sort of bash away the henchmen. You can do things like you can grab someone if part of the scenario you have to capture someone. You can grab them. Haymaker, which is, as you know, you the whole sort of winding up the fist to punch someone. You get a bit extra on your damage roll, but the defender is easier to dodge it because you're really telegraphing that a punch. And then there's other cool little things like one of the ones that's quite fun is I'll see if I can pronounce this right, the soliloquy attack. So essentially you activate your character, make some grandiose speech about how you're going to destroy your opponent, or you're going to you can do the whole sort of Hulk smash type thing, and then you do your attack, and you can use that once per game, and it gives you extra dice on your attack. So that's a nice little fun thing that you can work up a nice little catchphrase or something for your character, and you say that, scream that at the top of your lungs or whatever, and then roll the dice and see if you can hit them. So these are combat maneuvers that you can do. So they're not a special skill. Everyone can do them. And then the other thing that you can do, which is a real fun part of the game in the combat stuff, is picking up objects and throwing objects and using objects as clubs. So in the last game, we had my big stompy robot, before he got his brain fried, was trying to pick up a locomotive. Well, actually, it was a monorail. He was trying to. We've got like a Simpson-style monorail in our town that we've got, and he was trying to pick up the monorail to bash the ever-giant robot until his brain got fried, and then he couldn't pick up the locomotive. But yeah, once you start picking up trucks and dumpsters and garbage cans and throwing them or bashing them over the head of people, that's all really quite fun. So that's all of the sort of stuff you do in the combat. But then, when it comes to building characters, you have points. You have a points total that you start with. We find that in the book they talk about 75 points for creating characters, but we find that 85 points just gives you that little bit extra to really sort of flesh out a character quite nicely, to give them, so they're not necessarily just like a one-trick pony. You can give a few different attributes. And then, essentially you spend those points on either attributes or skills. It's so you've got your 7 skills I mentioned before. So everyone starts with just basic level of 1 in each one of those attributes, and then you can spend points to boost them up to 4, 5, 6, whatever, even up to, I think about the maximum is about 9. But once you get up to about 6, then you're in the superpower range, and then you have to spend points on super skill levels for those attributes. And then your basic attributes, and then whatever points you got left, you spend on different powers. And this is where you can really, the sky's the limit almost. There are so many powers in the rule book. I mean, anything you could possibly think of as far as superheroes. I've just got the rule book here in front of me, and I'm just trying to go through some of the powers. So they've got like, just looking here, alternate form. People can change form into like a werewolf type thing, or you can change into animals or something like that. Bodyguard, where people can absorb attacks to protect other people. Burrowing, if you want to be the Underminer from Incredibles, you can burrow under the ground. Other things like, obviously, you can fly, you can do telekinesis, you can do psionic attacks, you can do density decrease or increase, so you can suddenly change, so you become sort of ethereal and ghost-like, so you can pass through walls, or you can turn yourself density increase, so you can become solid as a rock. I mean, there's so many abilities. There's terrifying aura, so the opponents have to pass a resolve check before they can attack you because they're so scared of you. You mentioned, I think, Neil, when we were offline, I think you were talking about the Fantastic Four. You can make the elastic effect, so you can stretch your character so they can punch someone with their fist when they're 15 inches away. You can just sort of stretch out and punch them. I mean, there's just so many abilities that you can get. And then if you want to do a character like, say, Batman, Batman is obviously, you'd probably give him some sort of really good fighting ability, but then he would have what they call a gadget pool. So he'd have a whole range of different gadgets that he can slot in and out depending on the scenario. So, so you're basically changing his utility belt with all the different gadgets. So you can spend points on whole range of different gadgets that you could then use as scenario specific things. And you can also do the same sort of thing with powers as well. So say you've got, you can group a whole range of powers which are all kind of similar, and then you can swap them in and out depending on during the scenario. So as long as they don't exceed your maximum total points for your character, you can swap those powers in and out in a game, which gives you a real lot of flexibility in giving lots of extra powers to a character without going over their points limit. So yeah, it's just so many abilities. But it would take too long to go through all of them. But yeah, any possible power you can think of from superheroes, it's in there. And also then you've got your henchmen as well. That can be you've got rules for creating your henchmen. Another thing that you can do, which is nice as well, is they've got what they call boons and banes. So a bane will give you some sort of disadvantage, but it will lower the points cost for certain things. So for example, my big stompy robot, I can take the Bane massive, which means he's a bit easier to target because he's so big. But then it lowers my points cost, so I can possibly spend those points on some other ability, like I mentioned the Soulless before, to protect him from mind attacks. So, and boons are the opposite. They cost a little bit more, but they give you an extra bonus on a particular skill or power. So there are, like I said, building the characters and designing characters is probably the most complicated part of the rules. They do have some worked examples for you, so you can kind of follow how they do it in a step-by-step process. And they do have in the book a range of archetypes already statted up for you. So if you wanted to get straight into playing the game straight away, you could just grab one of those at a standard archetype characters, give it a name, get a figure on the table, and just start playing. So there are these pre-generated characters that you can use, and then you could then just go back and tweak them if you wanted to change them slightly. So there's a lot of fun in the game just when you're not actually playing the game, where you're actually designing your teams. So it can be quite addictive. I find myself rummaging through the box of HeroClix figures which I collected and just going, I could use that. And you look at the figure and sort of think, okay, what powers could I give that? And then you just start rummaging through the rule book and statting up your characters, and then you play them, and then okay, that worked or that didn't work, and then you just redo the stats a little bit and just tweak them as you go on. It's quite fun.
I like the idea of it. What about sort of scenarios for the game? Is there specific scenarios? Is there a campaign system in there as well?
Yes, there is. So I mean, it's kind of a bit like your I think this is something that's been done similar in things like 7TV or whatever, where you have like a TV series. You essentially can do a campaign like a TV series, and so characters gain fame points. It's a little bit different. The actual characters themselves don't necessarily develop. They don't necessarily get better skills, but they get more points that they can spend to affect the outcomes of subsequent scenarios. So if you want to just do a stand-up scenario, just play a game and just be done with it. There's 6 scenarios in the game, standard sort of scenarios you see in other games. Like there's a straight out fight. There might be one where you've got a particular artifact or something you've got to rescue, or some civilian you've got to save, or there'll be an ambush scenario, or you've got to escape or get off the table. These are standard sort of scenarios you see in a lot of these sort of gang type games, and you can link them all together into a series. Or you can just obviously create your own scenarios and play a series of link games together. There's also actually a role playing part in the rules as well, Mike. So because the characters are very sort of role play type characters with all their different attributes, you can essentially take the statted up character and play it as a role playing character. And then you can obviously play an all role-playing game, and then if you do have any combat, you can just resolve it on the table as a miniature game if you want. different things that you might have to check in a role-playing scenario setup. You just roll against the different abilities. So if, for example, the whole thing about I said before about trying to find the missing ticking time bomb, that's a sense check. So if you're playing it as a role-playing game, that's a sense check that you would do, just like you would do as an attribute check in a role-playing game. So yeah, it covers a lot of the bases that you would want to in your superhero game.
Yeah, it does sound quite fun.
Oh yeah, I mean it is very fun, and the figure count you need is very, very little. So 3 or 4 figures if you want to do a superhero team. If you want to go to the henchmen, maybe you're up around 20, 30 figures per side. But yeah, you grab yourself a couple of cheap hero clicks, put them on the table. Like I said, you probably spend most of your time building up terrain. That's probably the thing that will take up most of your gaming budget, is because there's a lot of companies now that produce really good city buildings. Because obviously, if you've got superheroes, you want to be flying, you want to be climbing, leaping from one building to another.
Yeah.
You want to be able to doing all that sort of stuff. So you got to have a lot of terrain. And then you go to your local toy shop and you pick up toy cars and toy trucks and things that you put on the table so that they can be picked up and thrown. You spend more, like I said, you spend more time on the actual terrain rather than the actual figures.
Yeah. Can I have a tech?
So you can have a tech. Yeah, well, that's what I'm going to do when I do my Mars Attacks one. The U.S. National Guard will have a couple of Patton tanks or something that I'll pick up from Warlord or something from their new Korean range, or grab a couple of their tanks and put them on the cityscape. So you have Patton tanks against Martian flying saucers. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
So low figure count, Neil. You only have to paint 5 figures.
3 jobs to build a system.
Excellent. Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it?
But I can see this being used in other ways. I mean, because as you're talking there about sort of mythic battles and the gods and stuff, you could kind of use it for that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So I'm painting up some. I've got the the Mortal Gods game for the hoplites.
Yeah.
So there's nothing to stop me using those hoplites as a henchman group, and then taking my Zeus character from Mythic Battles, and there you go. You've got Zeus and his minions, and I can have them going up against Hades, and maybe I'll have my Hydra on the table. There's rules for animals as well in the book, so you can create stats for animals. So I could take my Hydra and put that on the table, and you can play Supersystem in ancient Greece or Mythic Greece. Yeah, like I said, it's a real good sort of toolbox that, yes, it's super system, but you could use it in sci-fi, you could use it in gothic horror. If you want to do Dracula, I'm sure you could just pick powers from Dracula. I think they've got like a drain ability, so you take that from Dracula and make him ethereal or change form for changing into bats. There's so many stats and powers that you can use, but you can pretty much apply it across almost any genre you wanted, really.
Ooh. Yeah, it's definitely got legs. Okay, anything else in the book that we want to cover?
No, I think most of it we covered. We talked about there is the role playing, and the campaign system. There's rules for vehicles, so vehicles can be treated different ways. A vehicle can just be a standard vehicle that people get into, or you can create it like a character. So, for example, my Martian flying saucer it's a character, not a vehicle. So I stat the Martian pilot and the flying saucer vehicle as one character. So you can handle vehicles a couple of different ways. There's some nice reference sheets at the back. One of the good ones they've got is they've got a nice sort of they've got a page of dice statistics which you can find in other games. So depending on how many dice you're rolling and how many re-rolls, it tells you based on 1,000 rolls what the average number of goals you're going to get when you're rolling. Which I can think I'll be using that in other rule systems or designs. Someone's actually done all the math for me, so I don't have to do it.
Oh, so okay, so I suppose what's good about them, what's bad about them?
There isn't. I think probably the thing that's the hardest thing to get your head around is probably creating characters.
Yeah.
I think if you go to their website, I think it's called Four Color Studios is the company. They have a website, and they've got a few other superhero rules on their website as well, and they've got another version that's been brought out recently. I can't remember what it's called. Maybe it's Super Machine something or whatever, but it's actually like a Supersystem light version. So the creation is a lot simpler. It's like almost taking those archetypes that I mentioned before, and I don't think you can just tweak them a little bit. I don't think you can really go into the same sort of depth you can with the Supersystem. So that's a bit more of a fast play version of the same sort of system. So I guess, the negative would probably be it takes a bit of time to get your head around the character creation. The actual game mechanics, I think they play really, really well. I think I don't have any issues with that. It seems logical. It seems intuitive. It seems to do what you expect it to do. There's nothing that seems a bit odd that you don't expect. I think the game, because it's alternating activation one figure at a time, if you had multiple players, the game would slow down quite a bit. Yeah. So I think I think it's probably best as just a 2-player game, but we've played quite a few games with 3 players, and that worked fine. I think if you any more than that, the game would really start to slow down because one person's doing their activations and everyone else is kind of twiddling their thumbs while they activate their figure, and you've got to all take it in turns. So that could probably slow it down a little bit. But besides that, I think it's a good, solid system. I really don't have anything really negative to say about it. And the more I play it, the more I want to play it. So, which is always a good thing.
That is a good sign.
And like you said before, it's the whole sort of the realms of the possibilities of taking this system into other areas, like we just mentioned, mythic Greece or gothic horror, or fantasy. Like if you got your Rangers of Shadow Deep figures, you can stat up ogres, and your fantasy characters can have those abilities as well. So there's a lot of potential for the system.
Yeah, I'm sort of thinking like sort of steampunky stuff, like Empire of the Dead.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, because also you've got your powers, but if you do like a steampunk, you can have gadgets. So you can have all that sort of steampunky gadgets you can have as part of your character as well. So yeah, you could definitely use the same system for steampunk type games.
Yeah. So I suppose the big question is, where can you buy them?
So the first thing we'll probably just Google Full Color Studios. That'll take you to their website. They've got a whole heap of rules that they've got for different genres and periods based on this sort of goal system that they call. I think you can order the rules through that. I think my rule set was a print on demand through, I think, Drive Through RPG, I think it was, or War Games of Art. I can't remember which one it was, but there's a link on their website, so that'll take you so you can get a print on demand version. I got the softback, which was really quite nice. It's black and white inside. It's cover on a color cover, but you can also get a hardback version of it, and you can also get it as PDF as well. I think if you go to the Old Glory, the US Old Glory website, the Old Glory website is not the easiest website to navigate. But if you,
no.
But if you do invest the time and have a bit of a dig around, you will find superheroes or Supersystem in their 28mm area, I think. And then you can pick up miniatures there, and I think you can pick up the rules through Old Glory as well. But I think the best bet would just Google Full Color Studios or Supersystem. It pops up on the Google very easily. You just click on the links, and then I would probably just do print on demand, because I did mine and I got it within a week or so. It was pretty quick. And then go and grab some cheap Hero Clicks figures, and if you haven't got any terrain, just use some cardboard boxes. Just draw windows on the boxes and just play them as city buildings. And I'm sure everyone can raid their kids' toy box to get toy cars and trains and so on, or go to a local toy shop and pick them up for cheap. Yeah, it's I think you can get gaming very, very quickly with this.
Yeah, I was just looking now, so there's links to Lulu.com.
Yeah, that's it, it was Lulu that I got printed through. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and the paperback is £16.17.
Yeah, it's pretty cheap.
Yeah, the hardback £22.98.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
Not bad at all.
And it's a PDF on War Games Download, $10. So yeah.
Yeah, it's good to sort of highlight this game because it's one of these hidden gems. I think it's such a good system, and hopefully, obviously, people will listen to this and check it out because I think it's definitely worth supporting. Because I mean, there are a lot of what we've talked about offline before the recording, but there's been in recent memory a few superhero releases of one or two on Kickstarter, have popped up. So there are probably people who have board games who are wanting to expand their horizons a little bit and trying a few things differently, like in tabletop gaming rather than on the board game. Just grab those figures and grab the rules and stat them up, and away you go. So
I think I've got Marvel Heroescape sitting around somewhere. But, I'm sure I've got some figures I can dig out for that.
I don't doubt that for a second, though.
well, I mean, you just take some of your Rangers and Shadow Deep characters and just stat them up. You can do a Ranger and give them some sort of abilities. You can turn him into what's the guy's name? Hawkeye or
yes.
Arrow or whatever the DC one equivalent is. What's the DC copy of Hawkeye? Yeah. It's Arrow or something.
You may call it a copy. I couldn't possibly comment.
I'm definitely a Marvel fanboy. I'm not a DC fanboy.
No, dear.
Yeah.
I'm with you, mate. Yeah, it's my as I say, it's Josh. He's the DC fanboy in this house.
Although I did pick up a beautiful figure from Hasslefree. Hasslefree did a Kickstarter for some sort of pin-up style fantasy female figures.
Yeah.
Which I picked some of those up for Frostgrave, but one of the figures was the character was called Mythic Helen, and it was Wonder Woman. It was the latest version of Wonder Woman from the movies, and it was fantastic. So I grabbed that figure and I thought, well, yeah, I've got to have a Wonder Woman. That's pretty good sculpt. So
yeah, I'm thinking like some of their they've got a small range of like kung fu fighters and stuff like that. They'd be really cool for that. They'd be really cool and things like that.
But even some of their sci-fi sort of ganger type characters as well, and I think they've got some like what do you call them, the SWAT teams and things. So obviously you can have superheroes. You've got to have the police and the SWAT teams trying to take down the villains before and getting slaughtered before the superheroes arrive to save the day. So you pick up some SWAT teams from Hasslefree, or I think does Copplestone do something like that as well? I think they do. So you can just raid your existing miniatures range as well and just adapt them for superheroes.
Cool.
I'm going to go off and try and find some figures for the Tick now.
I'm sure there's a HeroClix figure for the Tick. I'm sure there is one. You can probably pick them up on eBay for like $1 or something. They're really, really cheap. Some of the HeroClix figures, they're very hit and miss as far as quality goes. Some sculpts are quite nice. Some are basically blobs on a bit of plastic. But what I've done with a lot of the HeroClix is I take one and then I either cut off the cape, because no capes.
We had to get that in there somewhere.
No capes.
No capes.
So yeah, I just remove a cape or put a cape on if I've got some green stuff. Put a cape on. And then just come up with characters. It's great. I have lots of fun doing that.
Thanks for that, Neil. Another system. Another set of rules.
but not necessarily new figures. You just use your existing stuff.
Indeed. I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure Josh wouldn't mind me nicking half of his figures out of his Batman as his Batman Gotham Chronicles game.
Yeah, you'd be fine.
I'm just going to repurpose these, Josh. Just look the other way for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, well, that'd be great. I mean, yeah, if you got like the Joker, obviously he's a super villain, and he's got. I think that you get quite a few from the Kickstarter. I remember you get quite a bunch of henchmen, a lot of henchmen with that.
Yeah, a lot of henchmen, and so conversely, you get a lot of cops and that sort of stuff as well. So
yeah,
it is they're all there, and they're Josh, look the other way. Yeah.
Also,
nothing to see here. Move along.
Actually, one of the things I will mention is I'll direct you guys to a particular blog. So at our Wargaming Club, there's another guy called James who's he's probably the champion for the Supersystem in our club. He's the one who introduced me to the game, and he's the one who's got. I've posted a few pictures on Twitter of some of my games, and all the city terrain is all done by James. And he's got a blog, which I think is called Lead Capes. I think if I can check on my website, I think it's Lead Capes blog. I should have been more prepared for this, but you click Lead Capes superhero blog. And he does a lot of stuff on Supersystem. So he does posts about a particular team he's created, and he shows you all the stats. That's it, leadscapes.blogspot.com. And yeah, he's going to do a write-up of the last game that we played with my Martians. He should be posting that pretty soon. But he does a lot of posts on superheroes. Anything superhero related is on that blog. And so a lot of that covers Supersystem. So that's a nice little, and also, probably the Ledge Adventure Forum you mentioned before, Mike. There is one of the forums on that website is for superhero gaming, and there's a lot of Supersystem discussion and after action reports and people putting up pictures of their teams and so on the Lead Adventure Forum. So that's the other place I would go to if you wanted to sort of reach out and find other people that play it.
That is Supersystem. We'll make sure all the various websites and stuff mentioned are in the show notes. And so what we'll do now, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, I think it's time to wrap up.
Indeed.
Because it's getting early.
Yeah.
So here we are at the end of the show, and whilst it's a little bit later than what we anticipated, it's getting to the point of the day where Neil needs to get up, needs to kind of move along and start his day, as opposed to us kind of thinking, oh my.
Yeah, I've got a little football match to watch.
You got to watch
I've got a little football game to watch today at a mate's barbecue. We're going to go watch the AFL Grand Final.
Excellent stuff. Who are you rooting for?
It's Richmond Tigers, which is a very old traditional team, against the Greater Western Giants, Sydney Giants, some sort of upstart sort of young team that's only been around for a few seasons, and they've made the grand final. So I'm definitely going to be following Richmond because they're a Melbourne team.
Cool.
Because we can't have Sydney winning.
Right. So this is Aussie rules, yeah.
This is Aussie rules, yes.
Aussie rules. So this is a fight where sport. This is a fight where sport breaks out from time to time.
Yes, aerial ping pong and all that. Yeah, definitely. It's the only game in the world where you get a point for missing.
Excellent. I think I've seen Aussie rules once. Yeah, I mean, some people complain that American football is complicated. It's like,
yeah. Yeah, one of the comedians once described Aussie rules football when you're shooting it for a goal is that if you score a goal, if you kick it, get it between the points, you get 6 points. If you miss, you get 1 point. And they basically he said, we could see what you were trying to do, and we could tell that your heart was in the right place, so we give you 1 point as an encouragement award. So it's a it can be a little bit odd to people who are not used to it. Yes.
Brilliant stuff. Brilliant stuff. Right. Okay. So before we go, we do have one more subject to talk about. Now, Neil has first-hand experience of this phenomenon.
Yes, I saw it in the flesh. Yes, it was a beast. It was a thing to behold.
Indeed, although
I do recall that your shopping bags were pretty bulging too, Neil, on that particular day.
Yeah, guilty as charged. Yes.
I'm saying nothing.
I think you'd already hidden your stuff, Mike, hadn't you? You'd already put it in the storage bin.
Damn right.
We did have. I think, as you previously mentioned, we did have the very great pleasure of actually meeting up with Neil for a day at the UK Games Expo. We even got to play a game, which
Yes.
which I think I think I was a lot more of a fan than you were, because we actually got to get to play a game of Outer Rim, didn't we?
Yeah, I wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't bad, but it did seem a little bit. I don't know. It didn't. I wasn't getting the same Star Wars vibe that you were.
Yeah, I think it plays better with less players. It has to be said. But yeah, no. So we met up. We have played, and Neil has witnessed the force of nature that is a certain Mr. Hickman when he wishes to purchase games, and we all end up ferrying around various bits of for him, because it's too heavy to carry himself. And I was almost in that boat this last weekend. So what has Mr. Hickman been buying? Well, a couple of bits of photographic or Twitter evidence have raised their heads. The second half of Joan of Arc turned up.
Yeah, quite a bit there, wasn't there?
Did he get the dragon as well?
He got everything.
Oh,
He got absolutely everything. Apparently, the one major complaint most people have at the moment is the fact of the European version of the role-playing game was only printed in French. Not quite sure why, but there we go.
Sacre bleu.
Indeed. But yes, there was quite a bit of that, and considering how much there was in the first 5 boxes, there's a lot of Joan of Arc. That'll keep him busy for a bit. But that wasn't his only purchase this month. Obviously, Dave, being the person of strong will and iron determination,
Is he?
He lasted at least, I don't know, 15 seconds after you tweeted about that particular Kickstarter.
Yeah.
That was like waving a red flag to a bull, wasn't it? It was Mike. You just.
Yes, I had I did have a conversation with a slightly text conversation with Mike, accusing him of
You swore at me.
You were just toying with him. He was your plaything. You were just dazzling in front of him.
Yeah, he was. Yes, I was. I called him cruel and heartless. Because it was yes. All he had to do was just go, "Oh, Dave, look at this." That was all it took. Yeah.
Was it fish in barrel?
Oh yeah. And because the other thing was that the aforementioned Derby show, having discussed Dark and Deep Dungeon on the last show, and showed David on the Warbase's website, one better than me.
Oh dear.
Yeah, he basically ordered everything because he had the starter set, plus he had the armory and the prison set. I was kind of waiting on the armory and prison set. I might get them. I'll pick them up at a later date. No hanging around with Dave. So, as I say, so he pre-ordered those from Martin at Warbases, went and picked them up, and then basically turned around to me and said, "Right, we're not hanging around here much longer," because he's got about he's got about 5 or 6 kilos of MDF in his rucksack.
Oh dear.
Does he have a permanent odor of burnt MDF around him these days?
well, what with that and all the gangs and the fact he owns about half of Rome. Yeah. With the other half on pre-order.
I just visited Rome on my holiday, and I don't remember seeing any MDF buildings anywhere. I don't think it's very historically accurate.
Don't tell him that. Yeah.
Anyway, so that's what Dave's bought this week. So right, all that remains is for us to get out of here, because it's sort of boing. It's time for bed.
You guys are turning into pumpkins now, aren't you?
Something like that. I think Hobbsy is. Is that right, mate?
Yeah, time to go now. Okay, now.
Right. Okay. So
Betty buys.
All that remains to be said is, Neil, thank you for coming on the show. It has been great to chat. It would have been so much easier if we recorded this when you were in the same country. But never mind. It has been fantastic to chat again, mate. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Yeah,
my pleasure. I've enjoyed it immensely.
No, it's been great, mate. Thank you. Yeah, it's been great. Thank you. Thank you for giving up your Saturday morning, and we really appreciate it. I hope you enjoy your Barbie later. And Mike,
next time you go on a holiday, don't worry about this Bulgarian nonsense. Just come over to Australia.
Don't go over there. It's full of spiders and snakes and anything wants to kill you. I'll go to New Zealand. There's not many dangerous animals there. Much more civilized place.
There's hobbits, though.
Yeah,
that's what I'm going. You know what my Hobbit theory is about in New Zealand. If you go back to the 1970s in New Zealand, there were no hobbits, but they had a whole heap of there were hobbits, but then you don't see them anymore now because I've worked out that kiwi fruit are actually hobbit eggs.
Edit that out, mate. It wasn't worth it. It really just wasn't worth it.
I'm badly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and on that note,
they're egg shaped.
Yes. On that bombshell. Hang on, we started this show talking about eggs. There's obviously something. Yes. There's obviously something Antipodean about all this. So right, so we shall get out of here. So Neil, thank you so much for coming on the show, and to the Welsh Wizard, thank you for turning up, sir. Nice to have you with us.
Sorry, a bit late.
That's all right. I mean, obviously, got distracted for the best of reasons. Go back and do better next time, young man.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. So thank you for joining me. And finally, to all the listeners, thank you for listening. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Thank you for your support. And take care. Happy gaming. We'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.
Please.
Thank you for listening to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, why not share it with others by leaving us a review on iTunes? And if you have any comments or questions, you can always email the show. The address is info@meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. And you can also visit our webpage, where you'll find a complete episode archive, all the View from the Veranda podcasts, rules reviews, and our blog of hobby items and news, which is updated several times a week. This is also where you'll find the links to our presence on social media, And here you can follow us on Twitter or join our Facebook group. And finally, here you can also find details should you wish to support us by making a donation to the podcast. All this on the Meeples and Miniatures website, www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 3.0 Unported license. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.